Oh, no. I got to tune this. My
Too late, Jacob.
Better go quick.
I don't want you to have crap. High on the mountaintop, our banner is unfurled. Ye nations now look up, it waves to all the world. In Deseret, sweet peaceful land, on Zion's mount, behold it stand. There you go. If you want another verse, I'll give it to you. If you want something else, man, I feel high on a mountaintop in a very sober kind of way.
Yay.
You got that sick reverb going too, man. I like it.
It does that. It kind of fills in the gaps, make it so all my little inaccuracies are semi-hidden, and that's what I'm all about, hiding a little bit of the truth. Whitewashed. It's the whitewashed version of my singing.
If you could add a little bit of that Europe, that British twang instead of the Southern twang with the reverb, then everything you say is accurate.
Do you have an LDS background, Mr. Paranoid American?
I don't. I'm a prospective member, maybe.
Okay, so there's
he's a Masmo.
There's
right?
there's one of the songs that are meant for the men, called Come All Ye Sons of God, and it sounds like it's meant to be sung in an Irish pub. Repent and be baptized and have your sins remitted. That's what I hear whenever that verse comes up. So in any event, when the time comes, let me know, I'll baptize you.
I don't know if they want me, man. Maybe you do, but I don't know if they do.
They kicked me out. LDS corporate has officially kicked me out.
You're out.
Is this a recent development?
And here's the very short version. I had a life-changing baptism of fire experience January of 2020, and it was directly involved in learning that Joseph Smith was not the originator of LDS polygamy, but the polygamist killed him, took over. Because I talked about it openly, I was told, you don't support the leadership of the church, you're boom, officially excommunicated. And I still show up front row Joe most Sundays, and my bishop, who had me excommunicated while wearing his mask and everything else, he can't even make eye contact with me.
I would deliberately make eye contact.
Why aren't they escorting you out with the Mormon muscle?
Well, because I get along well with people. In other words, I believe their hope was like, well, Jacob will now fade away. We don't have to acknowledge it, because they're still trying to play upon their own consciences to where it's like, oh, we love him, we pray for him. Great. Do you guys talk about Jesus? That's my favorite topic. I've never found anybody who enjoys talking about it for longer durations than myself. And that's kind of uncomfortable, because they realize we don't like talking about Jesus, even though we claim to be his one and only church.
I'm a little confused, because I always assumed that if you were excommunicated, like in the Roman Catholic Church, if you were excommunicated and your pastor, your cardinal, or whoever knew that you were excommunicated, I don't even think you'd get admission in there unless you made a big stink about it.
It's a different.
But he's with his kids.
It's a different feeling than that in LDS culture, because it's a matter of we still hope that he'll repent and get baptized again. And I'm all like, sure, great. Can we talk about what I am to repent of? Because I openly teach that Joseph Smith was not secretly fornicating with teenage girls and married women. And it seems like that's an excommunicable offense, to where LDS corporate proper requires people to at least stay quiet and not say out loud that they believe. They're not allowed to say Joseph Smith was not secretly boinking the teenage girls and married women. Not allowed to say that.
Are you just not allowed to acknowledge polygamy, period? Is that kind of the rule?
In other words, here's the short version of Mormon power. And I don't want to take over the discussion. You guys probably had something, but I'm already having fun. So I'm going to go with this until you cut me off. In the days of Joseph Smith, the very specific claims are manifestations of God and Jesus Christ, to where additional scripture, covenant, Israelite covenant people living on the Americas, and that authority was given to Joseph Smith to organize Jesus Christ Church. Something very different happened, because after Joseph Smith's death, the question was happening, all right, since Joseph, the president of the church, and Hiram Smith, the co-president, since they're both dead, who's to be in charge now? Brigham Young was the most successful in gathering a few thousand saints that followed him to Utah to create the Utah experience as we know it. But now a new doctrine dominated. Rather than the doctrine of give God your broken heart and contrite spirit in order to be baptized by fire and by the Holy Ghost, endure to the end, hearing the words of Jesus, now the doctrine became polygamy or damnation. There's no salvation, there's no exaltation without polygamy. And if members of the church actually start to contemplate, wait, you mean that didn't start with Joseph Smith? It now calls into question the legitimacy of Brigham Young and all those who followed after him, because they don't teach, look at this prophet, he's got gifts of prophecy. What they teach is an unbroken line of authority. And if a lying, adulterous man like Brigham Young was going against the gospel that was revealed via Joseph Smith, he obviously has no authority from God, and there was nothing to pass along to the president of the church today. So line of authority is called into question when you look into who polygamy came from in the church.
And I assume that this is exactly how Heidi sees the world too, like identical, one for one.
I truly believe that Joseph Smith was having some scrapes in the barn.
That's like when that was used. That term was
fell down.
Married, and he married William Morgan's other wife. So
I haven't heard of
but
William Morgan.
whatever.
And now Heidi and I get along. She actually came to my wrestling match. She actually saw me choke out LDS corporate enthusiast Jacob Hansen. Saw me choke him out in person in front of a couple hundred people.
Now, did he have to submit to some sort of belief in that he failed to subjugate you? Like
I was just able to take on his wives as part of my harem. No.
That's
No,
what's up.
it was actually a very friendly grudge match, and he and I are debating in person this Saturday in Provo, Utah area.
That's a weird sequence, because I would almost assume that the verbal debate would start first and then it would escalate into a physical, but you actually started with the physical debate and then turned.
We had a few different verbal debates.
Okay.
And the thing that I dislike about Ward Radio and Jacob Hansen, that their channels, it's a very controlled environment. If you ever decide to watch those, it'll be the one of them that I know Heidi has watched. It's kind of like 4-on-1. They'd interrupt me a whole bunch. Yeah. And I do have to become cantankerous to the point to where it's distasteful for me to watch myself, as I keep saying, hey, hold on, share my screen. You guys claim to believe in this. And I would have to get really not borderline aggressive. I would have to get downright strictly assertive to get them to give me a moment and say, you guys pretend you believe in this. This is your scriptures, isn't it? Why is it that you're going against it? So I dislike the controlled environment. It is going to be a time to debate, but what I'm most looking forward to is afterwards an open form Q&A, because LDS corporate proper, if you ask a question, can you receive eternal life that's talked about in the scriptures if you don't believe the president of the church is a prophet, seer, and revelator? And they squirm, they hide, because they realize they do not believe that salvation in Jesus Christ is sufficient. They believe you have to have a certain opinion of the corporate president. There's no salvation for them without it.
Jacob, he brought out the magical hat.
What's that?
Yeah. What do you want? He brought the magical hat for you. He put it on this year. He's the steer. He has the hat.
Oh yeah. Oh, he put it on, didn't he?
And I want to just mention that we don't believe in salvation either, and unless you hit like and subscribe down below, otherwise you go straight to hell. You burn free. So I'm glad that you opened with that, because the whole premise of this particular show was to ask a really annoying question, maybe just one time in a million different ways in absolute depth. And it's all about magic underpants, and it's not about like the silly South Park version of it, because that is like the most superficial, like low-hanging fruit aspect. But I've got a litany of questions that I'd love to know, not just your guys' opinions, but what you think the official Mormonism response might be, both verbally, which might just be to not say anything, but also like, what are they thinking in the back of their heads, if you've got any insight?
Well, let me say what I think my strength. I know Heidi is super solid. I've watched a couple of presentations on her breakdown. I will assume the role of LDS corporate proper. I can get strictly into general authority speak, and I can give you an answer with high levels of confidence. It would be what a general authority would say if they had that option.
I'm excited, man.
If they were allowed.
He wanted a Momo.
So my general authority name on behalf of the fake church is Elder Brigham R. McConkie. So I will assume the role of Brigham R. McConkie. R stands for Romney. Brigham Romney McConkie, and I will answer authoritatively on behalf of the LDS Corporation.
Okay, are you ready for this, Heidi? Any last words before we get all crazy?
I am ready for this. Let's rumble.
Okay, I'm gonna have a visual here, just so that we can all be on the same page. So this is specifically, I think, what we're talking about, and this appears to be the progression of the temple garments, aka the magic underpants, from the time of Joseph Smith all the way up until modern day. And essentially it starts as like a full two-piece outfit into long johns, into a slightly sexier version of long johns, into something that looks a little more modern. But as we've seen images of them, they're not super modern. And that the actual magical part is that you've got a little line above the tummy, and then you've got one on each breast, and then you have one on the knee. And the way that it actually looks in modern garment, I believe, is that it's almost just like a little bleached or embroidered thing, like white on white, so you wouldn't even see it facing inwards on both of the garments. Is so much of this, is this all accurate so far?
Don't miss them. How about you, Jacob?
Those are definitely the real pictures. Here's the only thing different about the current garments right now. So if you had your temple recommend, went into Deseret Book to buy from the garment section, it is what it used to be. You would have a garment and there would be cuts placed, whether it's the compass or the square or the navel mark or the knee mark, and you would go home and sew up those cuts, which would be symbolic. For decades, for longer than I've been alive, it has been the pre-sewn marks that you see displayed there. Now it is silk screen printed, because oftentimes if you're hanging out with the Mormons at church, if it's men that are wearing their white shirts, oftentimes you'll see the little indentations of those marks through the white shirt. There's even some pictures of Mitt Romney showing that. Now it does not have any raised bump because it's now silk screen printed.
Okay. So I guess the first very general question, let's just acknowledge these ones all exist, but we'll talk about the modern version of this, knowing that this is the evolution. So first of all, at what point are they made magic? Because as I understand, the latest version of the silk screen temple garment are made in the Philippines, and my guess is that they're mass produced in the Philippines, just like all other clothing is, and then it gets shipped over here, and then blanks. What, somebody anoints it or makes it magic, or is it magic the moment that it's printed in the Philippines? At what point is it made magic?
You want to hit that, Heidi, or should I take it?
Go for it, Jacob.
If there is any magic, it must be in the production of it, because as informed as I tend to be on this topic, I am unaware there's no prayer ceremony, there's no blessing ceremony of any kind. What the only attachment that it may be, when somebody goes through the LDS temple endowment, they will be given instructions about what the square mark means, what the compass mark means, what the navel mark means, and what the knee mark means. And in as much as somebody is being faithful to the covenants attached to the education given in the temple endowment, it might have some properties, but no blessings or ceremony of any kind on the garment itself
that we know of.
That we know of. If it's happening, it is. I am among the most informed Mormons that you'll find, even though I'm not officially a member anymore. I would consider myself, I would know if there was any sort of a blessing happening on the actual physical garment.
Okay, so that being said, let's assume that the modern version that is made in the Philippines, because there's tags, let's say that that's what's happening. Are those being produced by Filipino Mormons, or are these just the same Filipinos that are making Nike and Adidas and every other shirt?
Well, I do know that there are my sister-in-law, my Black Dominican sister-in-law at one point was working at the clothing making facility that was in Utah. So I know at least part of it happens in Utah. I don't know the percentage of what part of it is made in the Philippines, but there's no longer tags on it. That little portion that might show a size and style is now also screen printed along with the elements. So don't know how to answer the percentage, but I do know that there's employees who produce a lot of them in Utah proper.
Okay, well, let's say that they're all being made in Utah, or we get a big batch all in Utah. Is that 100% Mormon workers in that Utah plant, or can anyone work there?
I believe it's all Mormons. I know that.
I think they would have to.
I think it's all of them.
I don't think they'd let it out unless it's overseas, because then it's a little easier to contain, right? I have seen that they have actually been accused of having some of these made in sweatshops. So that's
I mean, I found a whole article that had the pictures and I guess the proof that they had some made in Philippines, but you can't prove that it wasn't made by Mormon Filipinos, so it might be a moot point. And I guess the underlying premise here is that, does it have to be made by a Mormon in order for it to be magical? Like if I were to commission it as an atheist or a Roman Catholic, and I had a non-Mormon make me one of these, would it still be magic? And I guess on the tail end of that, if I hired someone I knew to be Mormon to make me one of these, would it be magic? Or does it cease to be magic once it leaves the hands of a Mormon into a non-Mormon?
Well, I know, having worn them the majority of my life up until 2020 is when I took them off myself, and I've never heard any member of the church ever express any belief in magical properties. The most that might be attributed, some people, for example, in an interview in the 1990s, what's his name, Marriott, gave an anecdote of a boat accident where he had to run through fire and he didn't get injured. He attributed that protection to having worn his garments. There's lots of anecdotal stories. So no member of the church would ever describe it as magical. There's likely to be a little bit of offense calling it magical, but myself included, for a long time, I did feel like there was a protection. God was an additional protection being given from God, directly associated with my faithfulness to the covenants learned in the temple at the time I received this garment.
Okay, I mean, so this brings up a fair point that the definition between magic and I guess supernatural protection, I might be conflating those two a little closer than most people would care to just lump them in.
Some of the members would get their garments in a bunch hearing you refer to it that way.
Okay, let's say it is protection, right? And if that protection is because of a reminder of your covenants to God, these markings, then it's the covenant itself that is providing the protection more so than the symbols. But if that's the case, then why would you even have to wear the symbols versus just memorize your covenant and hold it dear?
Well, let me share. While I was still a member of the church in the beginning part of 2020, still going through an awakening, learning to where, like, wow, there's a severe demarcation between the death of Joseph Smith and what happened after the takeover. I was contemplating the subject of the garments themselves, asking, Heavenly Father, am I supposed to wear these? And I wasn't getting any spiritual answer that I recognized. The closest I would recognize, I was kind of like, hey, Heavenly Father, I'm not going to wear my garments like I've been wearing for 20 plus years now. I'm going to go about this scientifically. This is my prayerful conversation with my maker. And when I took off my garments and started going about my day for the first time in 2 freaking decades, not wearing them, I didn't notice any darkness, any confusion, but to the contrary, I simply, the light that I was pursuing and trying to know my maker continued to increase. And I considered that enough of an answer. I got a buddy who also lives in North Ogden, really, really amazing guy. He's still active LDS. He did something similar to where scientifically, let's take off my garments. And he recognized a communication from the spirit telling him, why'd you take off your garments? And he's prayerfully responding, well, because the church is part of the New World Order. You've shown me this and you've shown me that. The garment is part of that New World Order. And he hears the spirit say to him quickly and clearly, yeah, but so is Haynes. He's like, oh yeah, you're right. In other words, his anecdote from the spirit was, it didn't matter so much if he kept them on or not. There was no scolding for not wearing them. But when he thought it meant I'm abandoning the New World Order, well, we're still wearing the corporate produced globalist garments, whether we want to or not, just because unless you're making them yourself, there's not a whole lot of other options.
What would the official line from the Mormon company be about whether or not these provide protection unequivocal? Because I would almost assume that wouldn't be the traditional advice you would get from your temple elders to be like, no, you know what? You can wear them, you cannot wear them. It's kind of up to you to decide.
It is not that. So as you're going in for a temple recommend interview, a portion of it will be about the garment. Even there's a decent amount of information on LDS.org, churchofjesuschrist.org properly. And it is to this effect. This garment is an outward expression of an inward commitment. They've been using that phrase for a long time. Us respecting the garment itself, not leaving it on the ground, making sure that it's properly cared for. Hold on, I'm going to sneeze. That was a good sneeze, and you might hear some reverb if I had my volume up. In as much as we respect the garment, knowing that it's a symbol of covenants that we've made inside of the temple, it is going to be showing God how serious we are to follow him, and it will be a spiritual and physical protection in as much as we do not defile it. There's some significant phrases that Heidi's nodding her head because she heard similar phrases in the explanation of her garment in her time in the church.
Yep. But I don't know about now. And looking back on it, even less important than the garment is the apron and where it comes from and all these different things that I think back now and I'm like, what were we doing? But I just think that their control over you drinking a cup of coffee or what you wear for underpants that's a lot of control. That's impressive.
Well, when this first came up, Heidi, and we were sort of exploring this before Jacob was here to give us some more authority, but you mentioned that your grandma or someone in your family mentioned making their own temple garments, and that's kind of what Jacob was alluding to in previous decades, where they'd be cut and you'd sew it. But those cuts, it sounded like weren't just symbolic, because the farther you go back, there was actually like blood stains on some of these, because the temple garment would actually refer to the real ceremony that you went through, where someone poked you and you actually got cut and you might have a scar and even on the knee. So I guess I was insinuating in my own mind, like, oh, this is blood magic. It was the blood that made this magical. And again, or protection, supernatural protection versus magic.
Emma was the one to get rid of this because she wasn't going to have scarred up knees. Emma being Joseph Smith's wife. She when the women started coming in, because Mormon is Masonry for the whole family. When they let the women in, they were like, listen, we don't want this all marked up and we don't want our knees all marked up, because we kind of like to look how we do now without the scars. So that was what I've heard is when things started to change. And so, but my great grandma did make her own. You can make your own. I would assume even today if you wanted to, but it would be weird. I don't know that the church would necessarily back it anymore. My grandma was like, this is my great grandma. She was super old. So she also got scrubbed naked in a bathtub for initiatory. So things have changed. I mean, yeah.
Well, the implication here, I guess, if I can keep picking at the reminder of the covenant, if you were to say flip some of these symbols, and I guess, we've got a square and the compass on the left and right breast. If you were to say flip those symbols so that the compass and the square are on the opposite sides, and then ask your temple elders, hey, does this still provide the same protection? Is this still kosher? I'm going to assume they'd say like, no, you're not allowed to pervert, the arrangement of it. So what would the explanation, or like, even if you still remember the covenant, and this is reminding you of that covenant, is it just not count anymore and the supernatural protection is broken?
I do know they have protocols that you had to follow back then, because she talked to me about it and was actually describing how tedious it was to make them, and that they had to have like the actual like little prototype from the church. Like you have to get approved to do this. It's like a whole thing. And so,
or even if it's not like an intentional, like you flipped it and now it's like, oh, that's sacrilege. Maybe you just weren't paying attention and you were like an inch and a half off in some direction, or they weren't like aligned.
I think they tell you do it again. I think my grandma was saying that they were pretty precise back.
Or else what? I mean, I guess that's the ultimate question. If they were off by a couple inches because grandma's eyes are going a little bit bad, is that no longer serving the same protection, even though it reminds you of the same covenant?
I don't know of a whole lot of scrutiny over what do you have underneath your clothing. The general feeling is that this ordinance and this garment is from before the foundation of the world. This is like before the world even began. There were these things prepared. They were given to Adam and Eve, and we dare not either allow or participate in alteration of these temple garments that are from before the foundation of the world. So there would be high deference to respecting what's already been revealed and trying to be as faithful. If anybody was known to be deliberately altering or being careless in the creation of these marks, it would definitely be frowned upon, and most likely instructions would happen to where, get it right, take this seriously.
So there was a meme that I saw when I was looking for these, and it had this exact chart, and then it said like 2000 to 2024, whatever present, and it was just like a lady in a bikini with the little symbols. Because if you look at this, there is a very specific progression of more clothing to less clothing. So I guess that, like, the question that I've got in mind of, like, what if the new present version was just like a real shortcut midriff and maybe just like a little knee pad or like a little wrap that you put on your knee? Does that still satisfy the requirements, do you think?
I can say this. Having been a very dedicated temple attender, there was a certain time in my life where for months in a row, I was going through 2 endowment sessions a day. So probably a couple hundred times within a relatively short period of my life, I would regularly contemplate on the instructions given about the compass mark, a direct path leading to God, the square mark, complete rectitude, the navel mark, referring to the nourishment both to body and spirit that I need to be engaged in, as well as the knee mark representing every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess. I contemplated the meaning of those symbols quite regularly, and I still find benefit. Even though I don't believe that there was some sort of supernatural protection because of that, I do believe that God respects the sincerity of people who may be ignorant, like myself, who are still taking it seriously as an attempt to show devotion to God. If we start to see signs, warning signs that God's showing us, and we ignore them or put them off, I think that's when we might lose protection from God. But if it is that sincerity, I think God really respects sincerity and is willing to correct sincere misunderstandings we have.
I also think they would not change them to like bikini version or whatever, because they are a show of modesty, and that is why the full suit is still worn by polygamous members. The full long john type to the hands.
Well, my
full on
understanding
the
though is
ankles.
even if they're showing modesty, you would still, my understanding, you would never wear just your undergarments out for someone to see. In fact, even if you had
No.
clothes over it, if just a little bit was sticking out, that's still not supposed.
Yeah,
So
it's
what would it matter if there was a bikini version of temple garments if nobody's going to see it anyways? Because my understanding is that it's like they exist specifically to keep these symbols close to your skin.
And modesty. No, because they make sure that you never wear that midriff again. And they make sure that you never wear a tank top again. And they make sure you never wear anything but those long jorts again. Like, they're not they're not playing. Like, if you look at the dresses that the women get married in, they're very modest, and they go over this with us extensively. So
yeah, I cannot imagine any scenario where reducing it much beyond where it is right now, because basically what it has been reduced to for men, it's pretty easy because most men might wear a crew neck type t-shirt as an undershirt. That's pretty common without any religious connotation attached to it. And guys in general wear shorts that tend to be knee length, so it's no big deal, the top and the bottom that men wear. Women, it has been reduced so much to where slightly larger than the normal tank top can be worn by women in general. But yeah, there's no showing of any belly button, and slightly above the knees is where most tight-fitting bottoms for ladies tend to be. That's still pretty much, the garment itself is as high up as that knee mark is going to allow, and the shoulders are almost completely gone on the available female styles. So I can't imagine it being reduced beyond what it already is. If ladies are determined to show their cleavage on the available female tops, it's an option.
Does this preclude Mormons from being gymnasts?
It's not expected.
No,
that-
you can take that
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
The LDS are not expected to keep these on during athletic or other activities to where it just wouldn't be prudent. And going to the gym regularly, I go to Vasa Gym, and especially the old timers, they might have that one piece that you see
Mhm.
on there. So dudes that are 70 plus years old, it's still common enough to see them changing out of that one piece to go work out at the gym.
They say you can take them off to shower, to swim, to go to the gym, and to make more Mormons, but then quickly replace them, and obviously for laundering. So
And
Yep.
someone was asking, what about sleep? Can you sleep naked as a Mormon if no one else
you
is
can
around?
do nothing naked except the things you need to do and then quickly replace them. So if you're swimming all day at the water park, that's fine. But as soon as you get home and you dry off, take your shower, then you put them back. If you're having a session to make more Mormon babies, then you put them back on as soon as you're done with that. So
Yep. That is completely accurate. It would be frowned upon to sleep without wearing them.
I mean, I've got some maybe annoying, tedious questions on this, but let's take a look at the one on the far right, which is kind of like the modern version. It's no longer going to necessarily stay in place the same way as that like the Long John version would. So theoretically, in a practical sense, you're wearing this under your clothes and it starts to ride up, and now all of a sudden that navel mark is no longer aligned with your navel. Does anyone even care about that, or is that not the point?
There's no policing of it, but the individual, I would if me in my true blue believing Mormon days, if anybody asked me that question, I would say, yeah, make the adjustment, either get a larger size or something that's going to happen, because it is put in a specific place on purpose. We want to make sure we're as true to that original purpose as possible.
For me, I never had the navel in the correct spot because I am 5'9", almost 5'10", and I have a extremely long torso. And even when I would buy the talls, even it just never matched up. But they were, I think, more focused that you had on where it would cover like appropriately. Like, don't buy them so big you can pull them down and have your business hanging out. Like that's frowned upon. Or roll them up, at the waist to jack them up a little bit to wear those shorter dresses. Like, no, that's not going to be looked. Nope. It's between you and God. And the one thing Mormonism inserts, and I think Jacob will agree with this, mainstream Mormonism, is a really hefty dose of shaming. So you would never show them, you would never alter them, you would never not do what you're supposed to do, because shame on you, and you would feel that shame on yourself. Like it's not even somebody policing, it's like within yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
well, if somebody saw a social media picture of you wearing a tank top and you're not obviously at the beach, if you're in a regular sort of social environment, tank top would be like, what's going on? Are they drinking now? If people
did they have an affair?
if
Did they get X?
For example, a buddy of mine, Kwaku, he's very popular in the Mormon circles because he is oftentimes making videos of himself wearing a tank top. The comment section always has multiple people asking about where he's at in the church, because bare shoulders means you're not wearing the temple garment.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good
question.
question.
Do not wear them. Kids do not wear them. You do not get the garment until you go through the temple ceremony. And that's usually at your mission when you're 18 or when you're getting married. So 18 and above.
I really like this question here. Can you roll up the sleeves? And I like it even better in context of showing the progression of the outfits, because there really are no sleeves anymore. So I guess in
no, there's a sleeve. No, there's a sleeve. There's a full. This is like not a short. This is not like up here. This is down here. This is
this looks like a t-shirt. Like if I had like
that's a long sleeve for a woman. For a woman,
what's displayed on the screen right there is the male version.
Men's.
And those ones, sometimes I would get the more stretchy material and I would get a small, just because I might have some of my button-down shirts look nice. If I would roll up the shirt, it would be definitely frowned upon to roll up any of the garment sleeve. No big deal to roll up your shirt sleeve as long as you're not exposing the garment.
So, but I guess the underlying question here is that in 1974, if I had these long johns and I decided to alter them by basically just cutting it here and restitching the sleeve so that it was the same length as it was about to be in 1979. It seems like it would be looked down upon if I modified this one, but once the official elders, whoever on high, was like, actually, you know what? We can trim the sleeves back by 4 or 5 inches across the board. Like, at what point, like, was it an affront to God in 1974? But then in 1979, he's like, you know what? We can see some elbow. You guys are good now. Like, who are you affronting by rolling the sleeve or cutting the sleeve in 1974?
Yeah, well, all the pictures that I'm seeing there representing 1842 until present, the marks themselves are happening in the same place. In modern styles, I would say it is above the knee rather than on the knee in most styles that people choose. That would be the only marking placement that has gone to a different zip code. Well, not necessarily a different zip code, a slightly different address.
But so
Let
the
me
sleeves almost seem like they're
clarify.
irrelevant.
People are asking if you wear these at the beach or get them wet or whatever. You don't. You just don't wear them to the beach that day. You just don't wear them until you get home. But I will say this, if you probably show up at the beach in a thong, people are going to be talking about you for days. It's still very well known to, like, if you have a two-piece, maybe wear a tankini. You kind of still are enforced to be modest. So, but you do not have like these on anywhere where they would get wet or like anything like that. So
if you were a lifeguard, like at the YMCA or something, so that you're not wearing it like, well, first of all, would you allow to be a lifeguard?
Sure, nobody's good. Yeah, of course.
Okay,
so that part of it is not policed either officially or by the culture. Like if somebody's a lifeguard or something else to where they're going to be an athletic instructor, I'm a gymnast instructing other gymnasts regularly, it's just not expected there, and it would not be considered as anything unfaithful.
Okay, is there any concept at all about, like, you know, Heidi over there, she's a lifeguard, she's wearing her swimsuit most of the year, and I'm over here wearing my temple garment for like 3 or 4 times as much as she is? Am I like 4 times better than her in any way, in any premise at all?
No. They don't care about what you do for a job. Like and they do have them that are dark in color for policemen and army people that are either green or black, so they don't have to explain this when they're changing in a condition where everybody's right there.
So the officers that I worked under in the military that were Mormon, they probably had like Mormon BDU.
If they had an olive drab crew neck type undershirt, that was likely a garment. And I think the only 2 approved military colors are that olive drab and a tan.
Oh, tan. Okay.
I'm getting stuck on an aspect here.
I'm not sure.
So if we go with Heidi
what I think you're hitting on is changing where the marks are being placed on our body would be very much frowned upon and be considered as making a mockery of the garment. But people wearing clothing, as long as it doesn't change where those markings are represented on your body, that's just fine. Wouldn't be any issues of people having employment in which they were regularly not wearing it. But if it comes any kind of, hey, this is normal social environments and you're obviously not wearing your garment, that's when there will be cultural enforcement of what's going on.
And I guess it's a sticking point for me because I'm trying to apply logic in a way that maybe it doesn't like fit very well. But if the temple garments have any sort of like benefit to wearing them, any value, anything other than it's just part of a ritual, if it's actually does something, it changes part of you, it shows your allegiance to God or your covenants or whatever, then I'm thinking that if you found yourself in a professional, like an environment where you're almost never wearing it, then that's not looked down upon because you almost got like this workaround, like, oh, well, of course Heidi doesn't have to because she's a gymnast on, weekdays, and on the weekend she's, a lifeguard. So now she doesn't technically have to wear it except for very short amounts of time. But if I don't have either of those jobs and I'm required to wear it most of the time, and then I just like don't wear it one day and I tell somebody, like one of my elders, I'm not wearing my undergarments today because I just didn't feel like it. Like, it seems
No.
like that would be looked down upon, but Heidi's
Yes.
technically doing the same thing. I just don't have the workaround. I didn't get a note from my parents that excused me to not wear it for a
You
day.
literally need to know in those situations where the police and the army get different colors, they literally need a note. Like, you have to provide proof that you are okay to buy those. Like, you can't just be some guy that's like, I want a tan one. Like, I want that. No, it's white for everybody across the board, unless it becomes a part of a situation where, okay, firemen and policemen and all these people change in one locker room, and they don't want a lot of questions asked. They don't want that. Like in the army, oh, look at that guy. That's kind of weird. Like, they don't want them dealing with that. So they just let that. But you have to have like legit documentation. When we talk about buying these garments, Jacob and I, this is digitalized. This is digitalized, and you go to the store to buy them, and you must have your temple recommend, or possibly now it might be uploading differently because I've been out so long. Jacob can talk about that in a second. But you used to have to scan your card. It was a barcode to even get in that section of the area to like get in to buy them. And just because you have them, like if I got in trouble and they said, now Heidi, you keep your garments on, but you don't get your temple recommend this month. Well, I'm not getting new underwear that month either, unless I go talk to my bishop and say, I really need some new undies this month. Like, you got to make an exception. He might give you like a week pass, and that's it. Like, this is very controlled.
But I want to ask Heidi. I'll make the comment. I never felt they were an imposition of any kind, just because it's so similar to the style of undergarments that I would have been wearing anyway. How much of an imposition did it feel like to you, Heidi?
It was pretty bad for me, being a woman that is very tall in the torso. The length situation for me was never right. They never fit right. Like, I had issues with my lady business. You don't get to wear underwear. So let me clarify for everybody out there. You don't wear your bra and panties underneath this. This has to be touching your skin first. So now you've got this bra and you've got to put that over the top. And then you're trying to nurse kids and they don't fit right. I've said in the we'll say rise area for me, in the crotch area, because I am tall, but I'm short in my legs. So like, this is, look at this. Whose crotch is this long? This woman here. I hate it every single day because I'm like, these just don't fit. And it really wasn't about the modesty or any of that. They never fit me.
When it's menstrual products that need to be used, it's very unfeasible.
It was bad. And just having a baby and the maternity ones and oh my gosh. But this is in 1996. I will say from 1996 to about 2009 is when I wore them. And so they may have changed. I mean, there's always room for growth. I don't know if they have, but I do know this, like for women, it's a whole situation because you get pregnant, you breastfeed, you have your thing every month. Like, it's just messy for me. So, yeah.
I got a buddy from the mission Polynesian, and he always thought that it must have been his uncle's initials that he was seeing in the laundry. His initials were LV, and he thought, oh, it just must be.
Or Louis Vuitton, right? No, just kidding.
There we go.
Well, so that leads into my other question, and I guess here, this is the LV that we're talking about, right? The square and the compass on each breast.
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding, and God, I hope I don't get kicked out of the Masons for even acknowledging this, but that in terms of putting these symbols on the human body, in Masonry, those are allusions to very serious threats that are sort of maybe not made against you, but it's like, cross my heart and hope to die style oaths.
Yes.
And that where these are placed is a direct reminder of like, oh yeah, you're going to cut my heart out if I do this, or you're going to open up my insides and the entrails come out. So when you say it's a reminder of your dedication to your covenant of God or whatever, I see that side of it, but I say like on the other side of that exact same covenant with God, there is a blood oath / death threat. So I'm thinking like, if I've constantly got these things touching my skin all the time and I have to wear it constantly, This is almost like,
Yeah.
remember, we're going to kill you. Remember, we're going to kill you. If you do anything wrong, we're going to kill you. And that's why these things are here.
Let me give you some insight
Yeah.
on that and why it changed. So there's a man that I'm about to interview, long form interview regarding his spiritual journey. I'll give one anecdote without naming him yet, but I do plan on getting this full interview published. Prior to 1991, every person going through the LDS endowment, at certain parts, they're shown the penalties associated with revealing any of these token signs that they're taught, which included pantomiming the slitting of your own throat, or the cutting out of your own heart, or the spilling of your own bowels. And even earlier accounts, there were things that were more gruesome than that. My parents both went through the blood oath version of the atonement. Now, in 1989, I believe it got leaked to the press in 1990, there's a memorandum from a member of the presiding bishopric. This is one of the bishops in charge of all of the church finances. Over the course of 18 months, he conducted 60 plus interviews with alleged victims of satanic ritual abuse. His name is Glenn L. Pace. So if anybody decided to pause and do a Google search, Glenn L. Pace memo, it'll be one of the first things, and they can read that 18 pages for themselves. His conclusion was there was active baby-eating Church of Satan operating inside of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he was trying to send out the warning, which it got ignored. At that same time, there was more reports of primarily women at different times at the part of the endowment where slitting of the throat would happen and other death penalties. People were having anxiety and panic attacks. And it is his opinion, being very close, having provided a lot of the references that ended up being interviewed by Bishop Glenn L. Pace, it was his opinion that these women are being triggered because some of the same death penalties are a part of the control elements of the Church of Satan ritualistic abuse. So
I also want to add
last thought. So in other words, in 1991, he believes that it was most likely removed because it's now becoming an issue as people are having panic attacks associated with those same symbols being a part of abuse.
And I also want to add that not only the church changed this and dropped some of these penalties, the Masons followed suit immediately. And I want to tell you about the reason what I think brought this about is the Lafferty murders, where there was a blood atonement and a slitting of a throat to, and this is the picture you actually showed is Under the Banner of Heaven on Hulu. It is a true story. It was about blood atonement and ritualistic slicing of the throat for the woman portrayed in this did get her throat slit to be blood atoned because she would not mind her husband and her infant was almost decapitated. So after this brutal thing occurred, I do believe the church came together and went, oh my gosh, like we got to fix this. This is like somebody that wasn't well. Obviously he was not well. The brothers were, having a hard time mentally there. They had to do some PR quickly because they knew this case was going to go to court and this was going to come up because they specifically were looking at the School of Prophets and Joseph Smith's teachings from back before. So I think it was a scandal that they were trying to get ahead of.
And you said the Masons followed suit. What are you implying? That the Masons no longer do these oaths?
There was multiple comments when I researched this that the Masons changed much of their ceremony after the Mormons did as well. So I'll find the quote here in a second.
Yeah, what year is this?
1990.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Very, very early 90s.
So when Jake, when you're talking about reminder of your covenant, is it ever in your mind about like, oh, and blood oaths were made, oh, and there's
I go through that. So
violence?
I went through at the very end of the year 1999 in preparation for my mission, so I didn't know anything about it. I still remember a little bit about the first time that I went through the endowment session. It's about 2 hours of your life that you're dedicating total between showing up, changing into all white, bringing your temple clothing that will then be placed on during the ceremony. For me, it did not make sense, but you are in a room with usually dozens of other people, men on this side, women on that side. And I remember looking around, well, my parents seem to know what they're doing. They're both in here with me. Everybody else seems to know what they're doing. And it is a lot of that herd mentality to where you simply feel comfortable with something completely new because everybody else that seems to be respectful, this is the direction they're going.
So this is the quote that I found. The LDS Church Temple ceremony is sacred. The ceremony includes Masonic rituals, including blood oath and penalties and the 5 points of fellowship. However, the blood oath is not universally practiced ritually across all lodges and grand lodges of Freemasonry now. The LDS Temple worship shares a committed commonality, but these things did change for both in 1990. So I don't know. I know you know more than I, and I don't know how much you can say. So I don't know.
Well, I got another picture here. Let's see. So here we go. I'm curious, Jake or Heidi, when you received these temple garments for the first time, did anyone ever tell you about the symbols that were in them, or is it just you just are known to wear the shirt?
I saw
I
them in
think
my laundry my whole time growing up, but maybe a little bit of preliminary brief overview from my dad. That was it.
And I think I was so traumatized about being naked in a poncho that I may not have heard if they did talk about this. I was like very concerned about getting some clothes on. So I was very happy to put them on at that point.
So potentially you're sent home with these important garments that you're supposed to basically wear for the rest of your life and social situations. And you know that it's important that if they get torn or ripped, or if you're wearing it like, in a way that's not normal, then that's looked down upon. But does anyone tell you that, hey, make sure you never put it on inside out, make sure you don't put it on backwards? I've had some days where I showed up to work and I realized like 3 hours into the day my shirt was on backwards.
Yeah, it's clear instruction that we're to wear it the way that it's instructed in the temple. If you'd share my screen for just a moment, I'll just show from the church website. So what I have pulled up, this is just from the church website, and it has a list of the temple recommend questions. It's only one question, and bishops or anybody else who's doing a temple recommend interview, they are not to vary a single word or syllable from the questions as they are written in the handbook. Question number 13, do you keep the covenants that you made in the temple, including wearing the garment as instructed in the endowment? They're not allowed, or at least they are encouraged not to ask any other follow-up questions because they want to avoid local leaders putting their own interpretation on how you should be wearing it. It's similar to tithing. They only ask, are you a full tithe payer? Local leaders are not allowed to ask follow-up questions about how much, what percentage, or things like that. So I think 13 is similar to that, to where if somebody says, yes, I'm wearing it how I was instructed, they just take them at their word at that point.
I mean, the Danites don't come.
Well, and Heidi, earlier you were saying that it's like they're well regulated in order to get some of these garments. But I mean, I can go on eBay right now live and I can order some. They're not cheap though, so I'm not going to. They're like $40-50
We
for
have to
something
start a
as
fund.
a
We
gag.
have to start a fund for Thomas's
Black
Mormon
market has
undies.
to get that mark
Yeah,
sneaking in.
well, now that they can just be screen printed, and so I guess so. This is alluding to some of the earlier questions I was asking you, Jacob. And is that okay? If the magic happens at production, but it maybe doesn't have to go through any special process, that doesn't have to be anointed, it doesn't have to even be made by Mormons. I'm assuming a lot of these things we don't have concrete, but if all that's the case, then can I make temple garments and sell them to Mormons and they're legit if they're absolutely to spec, or does like the Mormon church have to contract me in order for them to be valid?
If
Wow.
anybody knew that garments were being sold by a non-official source, that would very much be viewed with suspicion and angst. It would be, even though there's no official teaching on whether that's the case or not, I, for one, don't have any issue with it just because of my understanding of the garment. If your bishop were to find out you bought, who's this Paranoid America apparel? He sold you
Coming soon, by the way. Definitely coming soon.
In other words,
Mormon Monday undies.
and any local leader would say, what's going on? That's not right. Don't get it from sources outside of the approved sources. But
which
the
might
guy,
be in the Philippines or
which
Utah.
which
It
Which
depends on
would
if it's a
be
Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, it would be at your local, like you are instructed where to buy
but,
them.
but
So
here's
like
well,
bookstores usually.
here's the pattern that you're already demonstrating in the garment itself being reduced and reduced to be more accessible to people's modern styles as much as it can be. It's
I mean,
harder.
I'm essentially imagining a patch at some point, like a
Yeah.
transdermal patch that you just do
It's
bop, 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 and then you're good.
No, I couldn't imagine that because that wouldn't even be considered a garment. In other words, maybe when a new generation arises that doesn't have the current baggage that's going on, there might be changes like that, but I simply cannot envision it. If I were in charge of any leadership decisions on that subject, it would not be reduced any more than it is now. There might be some discussions. Hey, for people who have a long torso, I'm getting this sort of feedback. What can we do to adjust? That would be the only thing. But you're already demonstrating the garment itself being reduced is the same with the temple endowment itself. In the days of Brigham Young, it was much longer and there was so much more baggage, including absolutely violent, bloody baggage. I would recommend any Latter-day Saint who's preparing to go on a mission, who's going to go through it, you need to learn what was the temple endowment as it was introduced by Brigham Young in Utah. Because to say that it's a far cry from what Joseph Smith introduced is the understatement of the century. But it was such a liability for the church. They continually reduce what Brigham Young introduced because it is such an embarrassment. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints implicitly acknowledge, they will never explicitly, they implicitly acknowledge what Brigham Young introduced is embarrassing to us.
And Jacob is a non-Brighamite. He does not like the Brigham.
Yeah,
I don't like any
recognize.
of it.
I think Brigham. In other words, the clearest delineation. I do view Joseph Smith as a legitimate prophet. That the testimony that he gives regarding a witness of Jesus Christ and the Father, as well as the source of the Scriptures, I view it as legitimate. I believe that the polygamists assassinated Joseph and took over the Lord's church.
I believe that the Masons killed him because he let women in. I mean, let's be real. You don't mess with Masons or you
And
disappear.
I believe that Joseph Smith maybe found some hidden nugget, maybe Tetragrammaton. He found the name of God in masonry.
He found it.
Revealed it to the
Ooh.
Mormons, and then the Mormons were like, this guy's got too much on him, and they wiped him out. But now I'm looking forward to the Masons re-infiltrating the Mormons and taking what the Mormons found and bringing that back in the Masonry.
Yeah.
You know that they say that they have the true Masonry, Thomas, and we've had this discussion. Is this was a widespread thing in the 70s? They started being hush hush about it later, but they know that he found the Tetragrammaton. They know that from the sigils I've showed you. They know that he knows who Adonai is. He had his, I just want to know where the cup is. He had his ceremonial knife and all his other crap. So like, we know that this is not a secret anymore.
Well,
Dan Vogel.
when you say we, I'm just curious, Jacob, do you
Jacob
acknowledge
knows.
or like what's your take on Joseph Smith and his Jupiter talisman and all the other like magical, like literal magical talismans?
I think it was quite clearly a part of his life and a part of his culture. Now, on the subject of Joseph Smith's polygamy, I've done enough deep diving into the original sources that I've come to the conclusion that he wasn't the originator of it. Regarding the magical aspect, I do defer to Heidi because it's very, very clear she's done more of a deep dive into that. What I would do if I were to become informed to the point that I would have a better opinion, I would simply be looking at what are the original sources that are claiming these magical aspects. The Jupiter talisman is well established. My dad even got me a replica of it, which I used to keep with me. I really enjoyed it. That alone doesn't cause me to raise eyebrows regarding Joseph Smith. I think most people in Christianity who are digging into, well, what's the history of it? We know from before Christ, during the days of Christ, and since then, there's clearly an understanding, probably a dim understanding of the supernatural world, and there ends up being overlap of light and dark. I'm just thinking, I think it was Heidi who suggested to me John Ramirez, and he gave really good insight to where Catholicism, in many instances, is used to shroud the voodoo blood rituals of a very dark source, the different saints are actually representing different demons as the gospel of Jesus Christ gets perverted and changed. So
And
I
they'll
believe that
blow
anybody,
this off. Yeah,
I
they'll
believe
blow
that
this off.
anybody trying to follow God, there is going to be that infiltration from the dark side. Let me just change it so it can be service to
So,
something other than God.
so I want to make clear for the people that haven't seen me before or see my channel, that when I got out of Mormonism, I went on a lot of research. I am a researcher by nature, and I ended up really getting involved in the folk magic, which is what the church, they say that it was. They admit that. His mother, Joseph Smith's mother, was Scottish. She was known to be a Scottish healer. These were not backwoods people that they claimed to be, these farm people that weren't learned. No, his brother went to Dartmouth Indian College. I don't ever make anything up, because here's the thing, it's all there for you. There's court documents. There's lots of things that you can go see, these sigils, like where I presented a full presentation with slides to back up every single thing I say. But when I ran into the sigils, I started deep diving the symbols because I wanted to know what it said. I didn't know what it said. I didn't know what it meant. So it ran me smack into John Dee. And John Dee is an occultist. You're not going to find the answers for many things that are hidden within many churches, not just the LDS church. But these things are hidden. Occultism is hidden. That's what it means. They're not coming out and telling you any of this stuff. So I ran into it and went, "Are you serious? You want me to talk about occult stuff and look at these crazy books?" And my mom was super upset. She's like, "You cannot be looking at Crowley and John Dee and burn them all." And yeah, it was bad. So I was like, "Sorry, but I'm really feeling compelled to figure this out." And I don't have Crowley's books in my house, but I've studied a lot. John Dee is not quite nearly as sketchy to me, but he still was talking to demons and angels and whatnot. So was Joseph Smith. He spoke to 26 people that were dead angels, whatever. 26 apparitions appeared to him. That's well documented. And,
Is that
from
taught
his
at all
standpoint.
in your Mormon upbringing about him
No,
talking to all those
no.
people?
This channeling stuff, and even the hat, me and Jacob I'm older than Jacob, but the hat was not widely accepted. Like, this was, we learned about the Urim and Thummim and being studious and translating, and we didn't learn about the Enochian symbols. We were told this is all Egyptian hieroglyphics. Please go see my videos on my channel. You guys will see side-by-side comparisons of John Dee's Enochian alphabet and Joseph Smith's Reformed Egyptian, and you might be just a little bit surprised. So some of these sigils, I've talked to OTO members, I've talked to other Freemasons, I've talked to Thomas a lot. We've had lots of discussions on sigils, and they're interesting. They come from the Magus. I mean, this is like almost undisputable to me, especially where, his Jupiter talisman had the table of 9 on it. I believe it was 9 for him, but anyways, it's all very similar. It's all very similar. And when you make a talisman, you are supposed to make it your own. You're not supposed to have a straight copy. So of course it differs some. So yeah, the Jupiter talisman was also, by the way, said and claimed by Emma to be Joseph's property. The other bag of sigils and different treasure hunting things I'm talking about have been pushed back and forth. Like, that was his brother's. No, that was his. No, that was, because they died together. But I will say this for it. Hiram, like Hiram Abiff, his brother Hiram, was there with him and died as well. And they died together. So all the things were together and his family took that. But Emma, his ride or die lady, and I will say this for Emma, she wore a lock of his hair until the day she died, and she wanted that Jupiter talisman back. So she identified it as his, and she had that sucker. So it was identified as his, period. But his brother was studious and off to college, and Joseph was known as a treasure seeker, seer and revelator. I don't know why his brother would have sigils for protection from treasure demons. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like,
Well,
that would.
Jacob mentioned something earlier too about, and I want to bring this back up as the reference, but that the idea Adam and Eve, they were already wearing these garments in like the before times. Was that accurate? That like that people already had this?
Brief explanations are alluded to, but anybody who looks into it realizes there's no evidence that Adam and Eve were provided a garment similar to this. The book of Genesis gives reference to a coat of skins meant to be an actual physical protection, nothing akin to Masonic symbols inside of a woven garment.
Okay, well let's forget the Adam and Eve aspect of this. I am curious
Well,
about.
let me just add in
Yeah.
one more anecdote. These are sort of topics that are considered off limits outside of, perhaps if you ask a leader while you're in the temple with them, they might give an explanation. This sort of an open discussion is absolute heresy if I were to attempt this in public and be considered a member in good standing. So that's why there can be a lot more getting away with, oh, let me just briefly mention Adam and Eve also practice this, because I know you're not people subconsciously realize you're not allowed to seek an explanation about this outside of what I'm telling you right now.
Well, see, I wonder if there is a loophole in here that if a Mason asks a Mormon about the symbols, I don't think I'm violating Masonic code because I'm talking about Mormonism now. And likewise, if you tell a Mason about the Masonic symbols inside of the Mormon clothing, you'd be like, I'm not talking about Mormonism. We're just talking Masonry. So it's almost
But
like
isn't it interesting that they combine sometimes, like, when the president shakes the prophet's hand and they do the signs and
Yes. Oh, there's plenty
symbols?
of that. And I would say, I recognize that there's a
Thomas
very,
S. Monson, Google it.
yeah,
Thomas S. Monson, presidential handshake.
there's a very real overlap in all of Satan's forces. The same way that you'll see that there's communists and socialists that have all kinds of overlap, even though they're kind of competing against each other. I think that represents Satan's kingdom all over, to where there's going to be his aspect of it that infiltrates the Catholic Church, and maybe a different aspect of it that infiltrates the Mormon Church, a different aspect of it infiltrates politics, business, military. I want to share one thing just anecdotally. If you'll share my screen briefly, as I plug my channel just a little bit. I did an interview with a man named Eric Samuels. He was 13 years as a Luciferian. I think it was part number 3 where I'm asking him very specifics about his time going to the Luciferian temple in Ohio multiple times each month and spending pretty much the whole day there when he would go. He would see the high priests, and he sees so much overlap between the Masons, the Luciferians, and the Mormons. I asked him, out of these high priests who learn these mind control techniques, shaking hands in a certain way to snap people into conformity, what percentage of these men are Christian leaders? And his personal opinion is that probably a third of them, of the high priest, Luciferian high priests participating in rituals at the Luciferian temple, are active Christian leaders. So that's similar evidences to where in the book of Acts, we know that Simon, who just got baptized, he offers money to Peter saying, hey, give me this power. I've paid money for power like this before. Can you give me money so that whoever I put my hands on receives the gift of the Holy Ghost, the same way that this amazing thing that I just witnessed. And also in chapter 13, there was a woman to where had a spirit of divination. She's following the apostles. She would make her masters rich by her spirit of divination for finding whatever. She's now calling out loud saying, these are true witnesses of God, showing the way to life and salvation. And Saul turns around and curses her in the name of the Lord, and she lost her spirit of divination. So I know that, as well as the book of Revelations has indications to where Satan very deliberately tries to get his forces wherever God's work is happening. So just because we uncover part of Satan's work in God's kingdom, I think it just shows the fallen nature of this world and the way that Satan operates in his spiritual battle.
Yeah, I think that if you look back at the history of many religions, they're channeled. when you start talking about if an angel brings you another book other than the one I provided you, clearly the Bible says this is false and should be concerning to people. So when Muhammad gets a channeling and then wakes up out of a fit of blackness, very similar to that Joseph Smith experienced in the Grove, and then he tells them, "Oh, this angel came to me," and then they write it down way later because they memorized it. They were a non-written society at that point, or Jack Parsons does it with L. Ron Hubbard with the workings in the desert. I mean, they get the same thing. We talked to this angel. We're going to write it down. So this is going to be Scientology. Or how about we do Crowley, who saw an alien, not an angel, and he saw AWAS and he wrote it down and it became the Book of the Law. So not uncommon to most religions, i.e., whether it's Christian or occultic, this story replays over and over again. So, starting with John Dee, and before that, Al Kindi. So,
maybe the final nail in the underwear coffin. But the eBay underpants. If I were to buy them, and we assume that they came from a legitimate source, and I use them, they don't necessarily provide protection or even do anything meaningful because they don't remind me of my covenant to God based on what you were describing, Jacob. So, am I correct so far?
Yeah, I got a buddy whose papa is a cop, and he got called into to check on something involving a prostitute at a cheap motel, and she was wearing the Mormon garments, and it was just because the man who had just paid for services left him there, and she was wearing it. And he and his cop partner for that day, they were both active LDS, and so they were actually pretty respectful in getting her some different clothing and taking those back because that was considered very much a desecration of the purpose of that garment.
Oh man, this is a tangent, but since you brought up that anecdote, what if does the violating the temple garb or violating or being a bad Mormon, could that pierce that veil of doctor-client confidentiality, lawyer-client confidentiality? If I went to a Mormon and he's high up in the church and he knows the elders, and in a private session, I tell him about all sorts of things that would get me excommunicated unequivocally, does he have any reason, or does he have like a workaround where he has to tell the temple elders?
He will tell.
And that supersedes?
He will tell.
Even if that means that he violates, like he could go to jail for that?
He's gonna tell.
They
have rules,
Yeah, and plus there's different levels of control that are, at the very least, it's low level mind control. If people look up the BITE model, BITE, for mind control, LDS has more of them than most other Christian organizations. In my opinion, not nearly as much as Scientology, at least not at most levels. But it's behavioral control, it's intellectual control, and lifestyle control, information control. There is in most people instilled a duty to tell on others when something's not right.
Yep.
Okay.
They do this often. And the big thing with Mormonism is they keep you so wound tightly. You're so worried about it. You probably tell on yourself, to be quite honest. You're just so, it's very MK Ultra-ish. Like it's very controlled. And my husband, shout out dude 271, he's on there from Bingham Mine Canyon. He often says if they can get you not to drink coffee, if they could get you to change your underwear to a certain thing, if they can get you to do all these things, what else can they get you to do?
Yeah.
And I guess there's a good point here that's kind of going unsaid. Maybe I'll just say it out loud, but it's like, if you find yourself looking for these kind of workarounds or wondering, hey, can I print my own bootleg? You're probably already like not in the crowd that this would, like, these questions would even apply to begin with. So I understand that you're already starting to venture out.
Well, let me explain a mindset change that is happening. So in my father's generation, he joined the church when he was in his 20s, and he was in the military. And so in the 70s and 80s, even in the 90s especially, there was so much growth among the membership of the church, at least the way the numbers that we're showing, that the leaders talking to priesthood holders or members in general would give such a feeling of, this is the stone cut out of the mountain without hands that shall roll forth and fill the entire earth. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is God's one and only true church. And they were fully confident that this exponential growth is going to continue happen forever. And so my dad is part of a generation that has that level of confidence instilled with his membership in the church. There is not quite that same severity that was instilled with me being the next generation. And now Gen Z that is rising in the church does not nearly take seriously the perceived authority of the leaders of the church. So it is dramatically changing. Those active 70s, 80s, and 90s, God's one and only church, don't you dare speak evil of the current leaders. There's a lot more people my age that are questioning. The 20-something-year-olds right now, very little of that same kind of respect for the current leaders.
It happened when the internet became a thing, and they really did try to fight back and say, you shouldn't be looking up things like that. Don't read books that aren't approved. Don't get on the internet and unless you are on an approved site. If you have questions, go to lds.org. Back then, like, they were very pushy about how and where you get your information. Oh, go to your bishop. Like, if you have this internal problem and you're questioning things, that's the last person I want to talk to. Like, I'm not going to my bishop, so that's what happened is so many people got online, and like Jacob said, it's watered it down so drastically, because they did find out about the hat, they did find out about the rock, they did find out about this stuff, and and us that was raised, like, I mean, if they said a book isn't approved, out the door it went. I mean, it was gone. Your parents didn't read that, so they didn't ask why. But now they do.
Prior to the internet making the information so easily accessible, it is known that stuff that was so easily dismissed in the 1990s, oh, that's just anti. Oh, what Heidi said in the book that she published, that's just anti. And that was the end of it. Now the church has to acknowledge it and tries to give a whitewashed version on the official church website. So 1990s anti-Mormon is now established information on the church's own website.
Yeah, they have little videos like, so you've heard we're Masons. And I was like, what? I remember when I first saw that.
Let's show you a cartoon slideshow that makes it so, oh, we've always been open about this.
No, it was shocking.
I have to find that if there's really a video called "So You Heard We're Masons."
Yes, it is.
There is.
And if the person seeing that video did not go down the rabbit hole any further than that, oh, well, that makes sense. I have no problem with that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I just found this chart just because I've got a separate theory that I'm developing that I'm not prepared to completely flesh out here, but that here is a general uptick in overall Mason membership across the United States. So we've got on the very bottom, this is wards per state, but it's going down very slightly. It looks like it was like 12 at some point, maybe 11, and now it's creeping closer to like 9 wards per state. But the members per ward has grown from around 400 all the way up to 600s. So it's a massive uptick in actual Mormons, members of the Mormon Church. And then the top one is members per state, where there was like a little bit of a lull, but there is an uptick. And so it does look like Mormonism in general, even if it's no longer an exponential growth, there is growth. It is like year over year growth. The inverse seems to be true of Masonry, though. If anything, I would almost assume that at some point, if it hasn't happened already, Mormons are going to vastly outnumber Masons. So they really will become like the new version of Masonry, because Masonry is going to become something that only your great great grandpa maybe did, and you find this ring, you're not even sure about it, but there'll be Mormons still walking around.
I'll offer my prediction. This is not a prophecy; it's just a prediction based upon me recognizing patterns. The church growth of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not justify the continual massive building of temples. It seems like every general conference, there's a dozen plus that are getting announced, which is amazing because these are all multi-million-dollar buildings. I offer as my opinion / prediction that as the one world government rears its actual head, I believe we're watching the staging of it right now. When it rears its head, I believe that all of those temples are going to be repurposed in service to that one world religion / government.
Is this Jupiter? Are we talking about just worshiping Jupiter directly now without the
I don't know how
I think it will be Gnostic. After the Joe Rogan interview, just barely with, his name, Thomas, what was it? The guy
who
that you and I were talking about, Joe had on, the actor. It's recent. I'll look it up. But anyways, after that interview and watching so many different things, I think it will be more of a Gnostic view. And it's prophesied. This is a prophecy, not from me, that the churches will join together, and become the one world religion. And that has been pushed. And if you look up the current church president, there's pictures of him shaking and doing the magic handshake in Rome with statues that are for Catholics. Like, that would never happen. Those handshakes are not supposed to be done outside of the temple for any reason. You are supposed to keep them secret and sacred. And for him to do it just outwardly on a statue, just to be, I don't know what, funny, like, that is just wild to me, let alone the fact that he's a Skull and Bones member and an Owl and Key member. And that to me is just amazingly wild. Like, and all of the church. Yes, there it is. There it is. And, I don't know what to say when they mock their own sacredness.
They fully intend. President Nelson fully intends. He's already moved the church in the direction of globalism. He was a global proponent of the lockdowns and the forced medical experiments,
and told everyone to get that cure.
And I want to share with you, if you'll share my screen for just a moment, because this is conjunction with it. This is how the Book of Mormon condemns the current practices of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
He's not just touching the key, by the way. Jacob can attest that is a temple sign.
He's giving very specific displays. Now, Nephi, in the first book of the Book of Mormon, was shown a vision of the last days. And in his vision, similar to what John saw in the book of Revelation, he points out, behold, there are saved 2 churches only. The one is the church of the Lamb of God, and the other is the church of the devil. Wherefore, whoso belongeth not to the church of the Lamb of God belongeth to that great church, which is the mother of abominations, and she is the whore of all the earth. And he continued to give descriptions to where those who are part of the church of the Lamb of God, they're small in numbers. What they control, their dominions are very small, and it is specifically because this great and abominable whore of all the earth, it is active in the last days in trying to overthrow the freedom of all nations and exterminate anybody who actually belonged to the Church of God.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting, the wording here, because who else speaks about the horror of the earth, right, Thomas? Like a cult wise.
Well, see, I only recognize it from a Book of Revelation sort of language.
No, it plays into way more than Revelations. I'm not saying it's not biblical. I'm just saying there's more to it. There's people that have jumped on that bandwagon and taken that to the next level. That's basically, and it's a perversion. We know that it's going to happen, but the Whore of Babylon is recreated often, especially on the Beast at most Super Bowls, multiple concerts. I mean, this is Blavatsky and Crowley, and like, you can look into this, but yeah, it's occultic. So.
And just to take some of the heat off, just to re-emphasize, this is Masonic membership since the 1920s, and you can see that it's almost like an inverse of Mormon membership. So as Mormons gather people, Masons lose people. So if these trajectories continue, Mormonism, in my opinion, in America will be the new American Masonry, because it'll be.
Don't you think they'll merge, Thomas?
I don't think they'll merge necessarily.
I think whether there's a merging, if the goals, if it's evil, nefarious goals, as a group becomes exposed and people tend to have a much more negative opinion of it, I think it just transfers into other groups that are lesser known.
That's a great way of saying it.
Satan loves to simply change the meanings of words, change labels, and simply find another wholesome group with which to infiltrate and put his people in charge. Because
Swifties, I'm calling it now.
yeah, well, we see that all the time with Nickelodeon young ladies, where in their prepubescent years, they're wholesome as can be. As they become teenagers, they're still wholesome as can be. Maybe some introduction of sexualization at an age that is inappropriate, and then by the time they become adults, it is a very deliberate transition into darkness and debauchery. I think Satan loves to do that with institutions. Us here, we might have maximum 50 years of productive adult life when we're going to fight against Satan's kingdom. And he doesn't have that limitation. He's literally looking at the 5-year plan, the 50-year plan, the 100-year plan. And when he sees God's work starting to happen with a small group of individuals or perhaps an institution, I think he looks at it and says, give me 1 generation and I'll have my leaders in charge. Give me 2 generations and we'll own the whole thing.
Yep.
I'm curious with the way that Mormonism had to change with the advent of the internet, where like they could no longer just say, "Oh, that's the anti-talk," because now you could find, years worth of anti-talk and start putting things together. What do you think the age of AI does to Mormonism?
I think it's going to
Does
destroy
it have
not only Mormonism. I think it's just going to destroy everything already. Because think about it: if somebody were to show a video of either Putin eating a baby and it looks completely legit, or Donald Trump or Joe Biden, whoever, it doesn't matter if it's real or not. We simply cannot trust the legitimacy of things now. I think it's just going to destroy things in general, because already I am automatically distrustful of about everything that I see now.
Mm-hmm.
so
Just like,
with
and
that
here, yeah.
with that in mind, what if Joseph Smith were, born in the year 2050,
Yeah.
and he grows up in the ubiquity of everything is AI, you can't trust anything.
Yeah.
Like what happens to the next Mormon prophet? Do they just not trust that they're actually getting a true prophecy?
I think they're going to my prediction is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is a 501c3 corporate institution, it will embrace it fully and learn how to maximize its own profits right now. That organization, the corporation known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I know it's a mouthful, but I'm trying to distinguish that I do not recognize it as Jesus Christ Church. It is that corporation. If they simply closed all churches and says, we're only doing an online ministry, we no longer service people in person, they already have more resources than the GDP of most nations of the world. And they will continue to become wealthy beyond belief. And I believe they probably already are in their analyzing how to invest resources, becoming richer by the implementation of AI.
They are very involved in AI. I think Jacob probably knows this. The church is very involved in AI, Tesla, pharmaceutical companies. They are ownership in a lot of curious things, but they also have been a huge pusher of DNA, like exposing the whole 23andMe is not owned by the church, but it pours into it from an original thing called familysearch.org, which pours into 23andMe, which they're obsessed with this like DNA stuff, basically.
There's something that I absolutely love about the juxtaposition of, oh my God, the internet's going to ruin everything. Let's pretend the internet doesn't exist. Don't let people on the internet, to embracing it and now being at the forefront of embracing all sorts of other cutting edge technologies. Like what a miraculous 180. That's like the crazy character arc development that you would only wish for in a movie.
Yeah. Well, here's what I believe is going to happen. It's repeated throughout the scriptures, Old Testament and even New Testament, Book of Mormon as well. Those that are seeking to overthrow the freedom of everyone, establish that globalist religion, they will end up filling the pit that they dug to enslave everyone else. So whether that's AI, whether that's biological warfare, the methods that they use for global enslavement, it's going to be their own destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the other someone was asking before, and Heidi said that there's different sort of sects within Mormonism, but are there ones where you don't have to wear the underpants, for example, and you can do everything else Mormons do?
It is only LDS corporate proper that requires the temple garment that's introduced in the, I don't want to say just them. It is primarily them that require the temple garment. There's different polygamist offshoots in Utah and other parts of the United States, which believe they have authority to issue a temple garment. And I believe it's going to be more along the lines of the earlier versions that you showed in that picture. But beyond that, I don't believe there's any other Mormon sect that believes in a temple garment.
And they're not going to recognize it on the mainstream level, regardless, it's heresy. So even the polygamists, they excommunicate them, and they follow the letter of the law of the original unadulterated Book of Mormon, and they still are,
they're proud of Brigham's teachings, not embarrassed by them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can they put this back in the box? Like, for example, the hat. Can they say, you know what, never mind, that the hat is no longer canon, don't bring it up? Or can they say, you know what, we're going to go back to long johns, you're no longer allowed to wear the disconnected boxer brief combo?
There's one possibility. So the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it was the largest split off that did not go with Brigham Young. They were having financial troubles, and they ended up becoming, in the 1990s, the Community of Christ. And what they did was downplay the Book of Mormon as inspired scripture, and downplay other aspects related to Joseph Smith and other things unique to Mormonism, and made it so, well, we're focused on Jesus Christ and his gospel. We don't really talk about that other stuff. I think that's the closest that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints might be able to do, is simply say, yes, that's part of our history. Here's what we emphasize today. We instruct anybody who talks on behalf of the church to emphasize this and not our history.
That was the Community of Christ.
Well, they just barely went bankrupt, and the mainstream church bought their temples. So they're not doing so good.
They were in such dire straits financially. The church made a $192 million purchase of the Kirtland Temple, some other property, and some very meaningful artifacts.
Mm. But not the sigils, because they are owned by a private man that will not sell them and will not release any more information about them. So I think that's hysterical. That's why the church had to go. I think that's why they had to go with the hat. I think they knew that this was coming, and they were pre-gaming, just like they did with the salamander letters. Everybody says, well, Mark Hoffman, oh, you heard about a salamander in the Mormon church? That's silly. Didn't you know that was debunked as fake news? No, it was a toad, and it was real. So what part of this is like, let's get ahead of this and make Mark the forger, that we know he's in trouble, and we got him by the you-know-whats, because we're going to turn you over if you don't help us out. Like, I don't know, but in prison, he had a pretty curious injury, which he was left to his own devices for 12 hours in a, really high death row type situation where they have to check on them constantly, and laid on his right arm, therefore making complete nerve damage to his right arm, therefore making it so he can never forge another document. I find that curious.
Are prisoners ever allowed temple garb?
No.
Yes. No, I think they are, because of religious practices now. I think it's
I know the church perhaps that would be at the jail's discretion to allow that at the prisoner's request, but I know church leaders in general instruct anybody who's an inmate, whether they've been convicted yet or not to wear the temple garment. And I think local leaders are generally instructed, tell them they're not to wear it.
That seems like the time you would need protection the most in your life.
Yes, but if you're trying to protect the image of the corporation, if somebody who's in jail is wearing them, that would look bad. So again, I don't know what the jail's policies are. If a prisoner were to request, my wife's going to bring me my underwear, they're religious in nature, maybe they honor that request. But as far as local leaders, I don't think they allow that at all.
And also, it would depend on if you got excommunicated in the process of committing a crime, right? Like, I mean,
what if you were standing up for Mormon, like a hypothetical scenario, but you were standing up for Mormonism and you were being unjustly prosecuted by the state, and you become a martyr?
I know the state has to abide by certain things for Islam, so I wouldn't see it to be any different for Mormonism. If it is part of your religious, like for example, I work at an inpatient lockdown psych facility and we have a clergy person come in. Well, we are a detox unit, but he is allowed to bring his wine for his ceremonies. Like, obviously, we cannot say no to that, but that is strictly against our policy, like completely. But we had to make, we lock it up, it's got rules, blah, 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 but it had to be accommodated.
I can actually attest to this one, that both in the military and in jail, so I've heard, don't look into my history, but that in Catholic Mass in particular, it cannot be grape juice. It has to be actual alcoholic wine. And furthermore, the moment, and this is where my thinking, all my questions before was like, at what moment do the underpants become magic? Sorry, I have to say it that way. Because in the Catholic Church, I was unequivocally told that when you're in Catholic Mass, if anyone's ever been to Catholic Mass before, when they do the transubstantiation ritual, you'll hear the altar boy ring these bells. It he'll be holding up the Eucharist and he's holding up the Grail and he holds them up, and then all of a sudden you hear like a jingle, jingle, jingle. And I was sort of instructed in simplistic terms that is the moment that God actually transforms the wine into the blood and the Eucharist into his body. So there is a very moment that you can almost pinpoint and say, now it's magic. That whatever you guys just did, that's what made it magic. So that's kind of where my thinking was going into some of this. So I'm wondering too, like, and I was going to say in jail and in the military, that after that becomes the body and the blood, you can't pour the blood of Christ down a drain. Like, that would be the worst thing in the world. So somebody has to drink that, even if you're on duty, even if you're in jail, even if you're supposed to be in training.
Bottoms up. I'm getting closer to God.
I was getting drunk on Sundays in boot camp. I'll just say that.
I'm just extra spiritual today.
Volunteer to be the chaplain. You get pizza and beer. So
yeah, I think they would have to abide by, the rights of the people at this point, because it's pushed so hard. It's a constitutional right to freedom of religion. I don't think they would say absolutely not. I do think if you weren't in solitary confinement, they might urge you against it for the reasons that Jacob's provided, and possibly if you have been excommunicated, therefore you would not be able to say they're still mine because you're no longer a member of the church. So if you're in jail, you probably broke some rule, and I think that's probably where they would get out of that. That's just a guess.
Okay, I've got one other final tangent here, and we can throw everything else in on this, but with the concept of the garment symbols themselves, right? Heidi was describing, and it seemed like you acknowledged that in the distant past, those garment symbols actually represented something that happened to your physical body. Heidi mentioned that, what was her name? Emma was like, not these knees, you're not doing that too, but that was an illusion that they actually used to maybe scar you, or like something would happen to your body to remind you of that. And then the temple garments went from being in addition to into a in place of, so that people didn't have to get cars scarred and cut up and everything. So the first question is sort of like a leading question, because I think I know the answer, but are Mormons allowed to get tattoos?
It's highly discouraged.
Mhm.
It was probably, I know that it was a part of instructional handbooks to the leaders to not get tattoos. It was the general cultural enforcement that somebody with tattoos is obviously not going to be called upon to any leadership duties. It has changed culturally in more recent years. Anybody speaking on behalf of the church is going to discourage it, referring to your body as the temple of God, and not to mark it with anything like a tattoo, regardless of that tattoo's nature.
My great grandma didn't even pierce her ears for that reason.
So maybe not explicitly stated as being like, you're going to go to Mormon hell for this, but so discouraged that you almost infer it. So
in probably only one generation past, it was probably a part of all official church handbooks, no tattoos. I don't know if it's still a part of it. You know what? We could look it up. In other words, people can go to churchofjesuschrist.org. They can look up the official handbooks and type in tattoo, and I'll bet you there's going to be things discouraging it in there.
They discourage it, but I did get a tattoo while I was a Temple Mormon, and they didn't chuck me out. So I can give you that. Like,
Did you have to get it approved? Did you have to go and like tell people about it?
nope. No, I just did it, and I didn't ask questions, and just did it. And I have a lot of tattoos, and so
I was so serious about the markings on my temple garment that if I was asked to get those tattooed on my body at the same place, I would have zero issue with it.
oh my goodness. What about now, Jacob?
In other words, I don't condemn anybody for participating in that unless the Spirit's giving them warnings about it. I never experienced like a dark warning, stop wearing your garments. I already shared what happened. It was pretty much, let's do it for science. Well, Heavenly Father, I feel closer to you after removing them. Let's keep going in this direction.
So kind of like you were saying, Jacob, it doesn't sound like they outright say you're not allowed to, but it says counseled not to, which is kind of like saying
you get the look.
On my channel, I do plenty of conversations with my buddy Jesse Watson in Australia, and he's got plenty of tattoos. He was called into his local leadership as a local leader with plenty of tattoos. He even got more tattoos during that time. So, but he's in Australian culture, which is not as hoity-toity about such things.
Oh, someone did ask much earlier, are these weirdos in Australia? And I assume they were talking about Mormons, and I assume the answer is yes. Do you know?
Yeah, they've definitely gone.
Weirdos are everywhere, right?
Yeah, are they in large number? Are there any countries in which Mormons are not in large numbers?
Yeah, any of the same places where there's not Christians in general, mainly the Muslim countries. And there's generally an understanding, even people who come from Muslim countries that enforce Sharia law, if they are in the United States and want to learn with the missionaries, they have to receive approval from the office of the First Presidency before continuing on with teaching them the gospel.
Presidency as in Russell M. Nelson presidency?
Yeah. Yes, there has to be that special approval, at least from their office. I doubt the First Presidency is actually reviewing personally each case, but some official from their office has to say yes. And it's basically, there was a man that I taught when I was a missionary who had to go through that process. He was from Lebanon, and he was working at the university, becoming a professor himself, and there was permission that had to be received before he could receive the lessons from the missionaries, and it came from the office of the First Presidency.
I guess I had some other leading
question.
Yeah,
I have a question for Jacob. Do you find it odd that at the second anointing, the final blessing, you know about the second anointing?
I do.
Were you second anointed?
No,
I was
no. There's
that's a big deal.
There's
you got to be
certain amount of tithing expected over a course of years before you might receive a second anointing.
If you had to throw a number at it, how much does it cost to get to the second tithing level?
I doubt anybody has ever achieved it with less than 7 figures.
Okay, so tens of millions.
So if you really look at it, the last blessing, the last thing that you do as part of the second anointing is not given by a man. It's given by the wife in the home.
Yeah.
Do you find this channeling the female energy and like the yoni and this kind of stuff? Like when I heard about that, that was all because so many religions tap into the female energy. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what? I don't know.
I've never given it all that much thought because for me, my mindset was, man, me taking seriously what I've learned in the temple here is I'm faithful to it and keep trying to hear God's voice. I'm going to achieve all the blessings that he has for me. And that still is my mindset, even though I don't view the temple as the provider of any eternal blessings. I never had any desire to where, let me aspire towards this second anointing that I hear hinted at in secret stories of. That never had much effect on me to either investigate it or pursue it.
But knowing that we don't hold the priesthood, but we become priestesses when this happens in the second anointing, it is really crazy to me because my whole life I was just told like a 12-year-old boy has more authority than you have to give a blessing. You're nobody. You don't have the priesthood. And then the final blessing, the highest blessing that you can achieve is given by a woman. That's wild to
Yeah.
me in my
Well,
mind.
so
Oh,
oh
there
my goodness,
it
I
is.
like this guy. Don't let him talk.
Ah,
Don't let him talk.
there it
I'm going
is.
to heck on. This is not Mormon time. I'm
Yes.
pretty
Oh,
late.
but hey, I have to point out. I have to point out. Everybody better understand that heck is for people who don't believe in gosh.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh, we'll get him. Oh man.
Oh boy, that's a Mormon joke for sure.
I've had friends who apologize to their mom after saying, "Oh my heck, sorry, mom."
Oh my heck.
I just want to say, 'cause I heard that last bit, Heidi, we love you, God bless you, but also we wouldn't have men's priests without the women at all. Like the idea that men can do something in a temple is only probable because women have power over the earth, right? And it seems like they've lost touch with that, but that is like the origin of the priesthood, that the women are the power source in a sense.
It's supposed to be a couples thing, but at the end of it all, to understand the fact that it switches from patriarchal to matriarchal, like
Yeah.
it blew my mind. I
Well,
was
yeah.
like, what?
let me offer
Like,
this because having heard a couple of descriptions of those who have received that ordinance, the wife gives a blessing. She does not pronounce any of the second anointing. She's just authorized to pronounce a blessing on her husband.
But that guy could do things. So in a sense, her blessing might be the thing that's giving him permission to act, right?
I
Which
bless you
makes
to
a lot
make
of sense.
your own damn dinner. I don't know.
Well, there's a Jewish thing here too, right? Because the Cohen priesthood is the Aaronic priesthood. We've talked to several different priesthoods here. The Cohenots, and so talking about the Deuteronomists trying to get rid of women. The Cohens had the Cohenots, and the women were doing the job that I think the Zivai priests end up taking over from the women. But the Cohenots, even today, if you go to New York, you'll find like feminist New York Jewish ladies who are trying to bring back the ancient tradition of the female priesthood. And it's really similar in a lot of ways in these subtle things that the women's suffrage movement do. And you're thinking, okay, well, the Relief Society isn't, super feminist, but it's not maybe like contributing a whole lot, but it actually does. There's these weird things it's doing that are building up the community. They're helping raise humans that can become like superhumans, essentially. And so the participation of the mother into giving magic to all these people and making it possible is kind of the difference between a dude who's chiseling stone and a woman who's growing a garden, right? There's a kind of unbridled power that comes from creating humanity. So I think that's also why men were afraid of them. And you can see it historically, not just in the Mormon period. At the fall of the first temple, a big fear of theirs is that men and women could have their own private, basically what we're seeing in temples happening in the home. And they didn't want that.
well, and I feel like it's fine. Like I never felt marginalized. I will say this as an LDS wife, even though like I just learned how to make casseroles in Relief Society because I felt like it was important and like toll
It is.
painting. But I felt like it was fine because I was a mom and like I was doing my stuff and I didn't really care until I was like, why is this woman in here doing initiatory? She has no authority. And I didn't understand that as an LDS member, understanding that my authority only comes from my husband if he's there, and women don't give the blessing, but they matter. Like they matter, but like I never felt like I had some authority like to go bless somebody if they were sick, like I could help them, but not like that,
Well,
so
I
when
feel
I
like they
found
reduced
that
that.
out.
They don't want you to know that. Like even the modern church has made it hard for women to understand their own power.
Well, and then to get to the very tip top, because it's not like something that's offered to very many people. The second anointing is a huge secret kind of thing that's very rare. I mean, not as secret,
We're blowing the roof off that secret. We're
not
telling
as
everybody.
secret anymore, of course, but because people have spoken out. And I'm just like, okay, that's so strange to me that I would think I could give anything to the patriarchal like priesthood holder because I'm supposed to help serve. Like that's part of the whole thing, like is to help my husband be the best he can be, Like, this is what I was told. Like,
Has
to
this
be the
ever-
best
But
priesthood holder.
that's what Catholics believe. Like a male Catholic who becomes a priest, right, cannot be. You're married to God, but you cannot be the husband in that relationship. So the men are taught to become brides of Christ, and this is not a term I came up with. You can look up brides of Christ. It's what priests associate themselves with. So if a priest is modeling himself on the bride of Christ, then the person who's going to know the most and be the most close to correct function is the bride, right? Because she's showing servitude, which sounds like a horrible thing, but at the end of the day, that's the goal for these priests. So they should be trying to emulate the woman, and a lot of them know that. I think that's kind of the funny part.
Well, that's why they wear
Right.
dresses. And I was going to ask
But-
you,
That is
Heidi,
why they wear dresses. It's not even a
But
joke.
they don't anymore, except on Sunday. Like, I mean, the polygamous
The
sects
Sunday best,
do.
though. The Sunday
Yes,
best.
Sunday best. Yes. And there's some women that wear pants. I mean, it's not encouraged or looked greatly upon. Like, I wouldn't have felt comfortable wearing pants, but
Well, you
Was
know, the
there-
historical,
Yeah.
there's another historical thing there too, right? Like, you know, that pink used to be a man's color and that John Wayne wore pink. Blue was a
Right.
subduing color. It's supposed to calm you down. My great grandmother's room was painted blue, dark blue, like Jacob's wall, to temper her mood, right? They started flipping that around and saying pink was an activation color. Give it to the suffragists, right? Boys are dangerous. Calm them down. Same thing with the dress, right? You know, togas and
My
kilts.
background is the only reason I'm not roid raging right now.
It's true. I have to hold his hand below the camera. But
Now, help us interpret Paranoid American's green background.
green is like, I don't want to do that right now. But I will think of Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi comes up, right? There's something about that. But
Do I
I
have
just
to
want
change
to.
the
Whose
color
color
up now?
is green, Thomas? Just kidding.
But before we do green, because I can remember this, the dress, because the toga and the kilt are the manliest of outfits, and women who were slaves in Rome were forced to wear pants. Women and slaves in general, in order to keep them from being raped and have it harder to sell them, they were strapped into their pants. So I find it really interesting today when you have like these men's rights, red pill people, and they're like, oh, we have to rebel against women wearing pants, and men are the only ones who wear pants. Like, that's a really modernist approach that I don't agree with. Like, I think wearing a sarong and a kilt are far more manly than wearing
Well,
slave trousers.
Zertus,
found out
are you
recently-
wearing a kilt right now?
I should put something on, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Can you confirm this? Because I heard recently that traditionally you're supposed to not wear any underpants under a kilt. That you're always going commando style with a kilt.
I think it makes more sense. I mean,
You got to wear your garments. You can't do that.
well, it depends.
Well,
like the garment itself. So, like the kilt could be
Yeah,
the
Scottish
garment.
Mormons.
Yeah, I feel like
Scottish-
that's another
there's
thing. Do you
Scottish
have to have? They are, but do you have to have undergarments, or can you make your whole outfit? Because if you go to the temple, you have to wear a temple outfit. So the idea that you could wear that all the time seems plausible too, like in a Highlander way.
Well,
Just-
actually, that was one of the last things that was a very pedantic question here. But we were talking about tattoos looked down upon, discouraged, maybe not like completely banned, letter for letter, but sort of. So then my next leading question would be like, what about branding? Can you brand your skin? And it's probably the same thing, right? Your body
Yeah.
is a temple. Don't brand the skin.
Well,
Okay,
it's
well then there's
Leviticus.
something. But there's something called scarification, and scarification is when you take like a sharp instrument, and it's kind of like branding. But yeah, so just
This
and
is illegal in the church. Don't have a Jesus fit. Don't ever fall on a cookie cutter.
so
Jesus
that there's an example of scarification, right? And my thinking in a very sort of pedantic way, but it's like if the OG version of Mormonism was that they actually cut your knee, and now you had a scar from that, then the temple garment was kind of a replacement of scarification. But what is scarification other than using a tattoo gun and not loading it with ink? Like if I could scar your knee, right, and make the same exact scar that I would
Wow.
have using a knife in a traditional initiation ceremony,
There's a
how
lot
is
of
that any
evidence.
different than the scarred version?
You're probably right. I've never heard this before, but I agree with you instantly. And just because, all right, Leviticus 19:28, that is the reason why you're not supposed to get tattoos. You're not supposed to cut the skin, drink blood. There's a couple things that kind of lump it in together with. But circumcision
that
is
escalated quickly though. Like drinking blood and tattoos.
Well, once you cut the skin, you're not supposed to suck on the skin. I think that this happens more often than people like to admit. But the idea that cutting the skin is bad, well, circumcision is that. So why are we saying that one's okay and one's not? I think at some point they realized circumcision was part of this tradition, so they tried to dissipate it by the Pauline period. But similarly, being branded and being circumcised are signs of being a slave, right? So if you could remove that sign, but keep that sign some way, like by wearing the sign without branding yourself, that seems like a pretty reasonable thing. Also, to have a religious rule against being branded, reasonable if that's happened to your people, right?
I mean, I definitely think it was branding, like you mentioned, because I know the history of it. And so it was an easy way to tell, right? Like, even if you got free, like you still were marked as a slave. It's like an integrity situation, I'm sure, for that. But like, here it is, a widely practiced thing still to this day. And you don't even want to get me into where that skin and body products go to, because it's usually skincare, by the way, ladies. Yeah.
I have a horrible facetious question that I have to ask now, otherwise it won't leave my head. But if you were like a Mormon Ed Gain, could you take another Mormon's skin if they were branded and adorn that as your temple garment if it technically had all of the right?
Well, so that's interesting, because the idea of wearing the Technicolor dream coat, right? And deeper we go into that.
Is that an Gain story?
the Technicolor dream coat is actually just covered in symbols, right? And the idea that it's made of wool, we don't know necessarily that it's made of wool as opposed to hide. It could be a leather jacket. Like there's the idea of having symbols sewn into it or branded into it rather than it just being colors, right? So yeah, you could definitely wear the symbols as like a veil. And the whole point of this is veil, right? It's splendor, it's veil. It's the idea of, we just talked about the veiled angel yesterday. Who is Joseph Smith? Which angel is he again?
Joseph Smith's angel, or Joseph Smith as an angel?
Joseph Smith as an angel.
Oh,
it's like the fourth angel.
This is according to Mormon lore?
Yeah. The fourth angel in Enoch.
Is this the Lucas edition?
Phanuel. Yeah, this is the Lucas edition. So here, I'll pull it up for a second. So in this thing, this idea that angels become men and then men become gods, right? The idea is like Adam is Michael, or Adam is Michael according to Brigham Young. Right. But a lot of people have this idea that Joseph Smith is an angel as well. So Phanuel, which is the fourth angel in the book of Enoch, after the angels Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel, also known as Panuel, right, is the face of God. God has turned, right? The face of God. So also he's like involved. So you've got the first is Michael, the merciful and the long suffering. The second, who is set over all diseases and wounds of the children of men, is Raphael. The third, who is set over the powers of all power, set over all the powers, is Gabriel. And the fourth, who is set over the repentance unto hope of those who inherit the eternal life, is named Phanuel, right? So they associate often Phanuel with being the preceding spirit child of Joseph Smith, right?
IsBell is trying to get back in. He's locked out.
No. Get back, Jacob.
Yeah, he's coming.
I thought he was just like, I'm so sick of Andreas every time I see him.
No. And Andreas and me are going to do a show soon. And I have so many questions because
this is funny. We were planning it yesterday and I was like, I knew we were supposed to do something. Darn it. I'm sorry, Thomas.
Well, do you have any thoughts on the magic Mormon temple garments?
Billions.
Hi,
but yeah,
Jacob.
I want to hear everyone else's first because I'm late.
Let me try and restate what Jacob said just to make sure that I've integrated it properly, and you can correct me, Jacob.
And Jacob, you don't wear them anymore, is that right?
No.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's not magic underpants. That could almost be seen as like inflammatory. So the magic Mormon underpants, they either are reminders of a covenant that you've made with God and therefore not necessarily magical in that way. There's been some people that have claimed that they offered some kind of protection. There was a dude that like survived a fire or something and claimed that it was because of his magical undergarments. We've talked with Heidi, I believe, that maybe Joseph wasn't wearing them when he jumped out the window. If he was, maybe he would have survived the fall. But those are the variations of why they're magic is that no one actually thinks that they're magic within Mormonism. And if you do, it's more of a spiritual protection aspect, which led me to thinking like, well, then can I buy Mormon undergarments and get any of the benefits myself without actually being a Mormon? And it
Only
sounds
if
like
you stop
no.
drinking. You better stop drinking and all the other stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no coffee for
Well, there's a lot to this. So we talked yesterday on Ladder Wave a bit about like the magical side of things, and there are people that believe that. A lot of Mormons don't, and I think that they look at, because of the documentaries on Mormon cults, at the Mormons who believe more as dangerous. So because there have been people like in the 70s and these like daughters of the, what's it called, the Sisters of the Cult or Daughters of the Cult documentary I was just watching on these different para-Mormon polygamous groups that believed in more magic. So they have become more practical in their beliefs, but that doesn't mean everyone does. And so it's interesting, like having Latter Day Chad on our show. He's spent the last few months like learning about the esoterics, and so he's like gung-ho to have the Melchizedek spirit in him. He's very different than some of the guys who I think are just thinking that it's whatever. However, most everyone I've talked to who's gone through the ritual, especially, it doesn't even matter whether they knew it was going to be important to them or not, whether they knew it was going to be a magical thing or they just thought it was a social thing. There's some weird thing that happens to them. They feel very strange afterwards. They're confused about what they feel if they didn't expect it. And it does something to them. It changes them in a way that they've said the only thing that is similar, I've heard multiple times, is like when they've become a parent, right? When you like genetically, biologically, hormonally change and have different priorities that you can't explain because you basically become a butterfly. Like that level of change.
I definitely felt that. I definitely felt scared, worried, anxious is a good word. All of the things. And I knew what they were. I knew the concept. Like my family is all in. Like I've seen them my whole life. Like it wasn't like I'd never seen a pair or something. You know what I mean? I knew what it was. I mean, it wasn't this foreign thing like, oh my gosh, this is what we're doing. Like I knew. But you don't know what goes into the ceremony. And I think that's where you get freaked out, especially initiatory, which is why they've changed it a lot to suit people's anxieties and the signs and symbols, which they've changed because of anxieties and different things. And I think that, the mainstream has attempted to make it as comfortable as they can without completely perverting it. I mean, at some point it isn't what it was. So,
right.
I don't know.
There are differences. I agree. I think that it's I don't know if they like, so it's funny too. The people who don't know what it's about are
That's my husband.
It's strange if you'd have large junk pockets from some of the pics. I think the pockets are important because if you fall asleep, you need to be able to bring things back from your dream. So
there it is. It is.
I think you meant a different kind of junk pocket, but that's okay.
I think he meant the one Thomas is thinking.
I try my best not
the prison one. The prison one.
To me, though, it says like women probably have that much more power that you have to downplay it to women so they don't know what's happening. And maybe even the idea that the temple garments are inverted, that they're keeping your power from going out. But I've seen so many people in my like years of knowing Mormons who seem to me like Jedi is the word to describe it, and associated with this idea of the power of Melchizedek. I get the idea also that I don't see that same thing anymore. It seems like 20 years ago that was like there were some of the older guys still had that, but that it was already dissipating in the youth. So I find that interesting because I'd had this feeling like there isn't as much of a Melchizedek power on the earth anymore. And Jacob's talked about the Aaronic priesthood as like the last remnant of the priesthood on earth, and how that's the Cohens and the Cohenots, right? So it makes a lot of sense to me that there would be a magical priesthood that could be losing its effect because people aren't doing the things that they're supposed to do. And Heidi's even talking about how these things make people uncomfortable. So let's try to make it more, like let's bring it a little further away from God, a little closer to man, so it's easier for him to do. And that's helping a lot of people join this organization without necessarily understanding what it's about or like believing in the magic, right? I think the magic,
right.
I don't think that it's without I don't think that the underpants are without magic, right? Otherwise it wouldn't matter, Like there's something to it. Might not be good. Like I think that could be
That was my question for you, Andreas, is you're not a mainstreamer. You're an offshoot of what you like search into. Yes, he's bare. He's not got the garments. So here's my question is, do they invoke channeling with the mirrors in the ceremony when they are getting sealed, let alone the other things that we do, blood oaths, whatever oaths? They've switched them around a little bit, but we still know what we're saying. We still know what that means. So where and why? Like, I have my own theories, and with spires on each temple and all this stuff, right? Like, is this a loosh grab? Basically.
Well, you saw the new Mormon church logo, right? Is no longer Moroni with a horn, right?
We do need an outro song, Jacob.
You do.
Yes.
I can't find the picture right now, but it's the pillars of Joachim and Boaz, right? The pillars of Joachim and Boaz. So they've already kind of told you.
Thomas is happy.
They've already told you it's about that. They've already told you it is a magical ritual, and the idea of using scrying mirrors to, filter light so that you can get specific frequencies of beings, like that's something seems pretty obvious, right? I don't know.
For me, because they face each other and they go on forever, the forever mirrors. And at that point, I'm like, this is like witchcraft. But I didn't know that then. I didn't know anything about
craft. It's definitely craft.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like,
well, okay, quote unquote, right? Like we're gonna put it in little that's something practiced in witchcraft.
But the idea that women are practicing witches, see, like this is the thing. Maybe Mormonism is great because it's trying to heal us from calling magical women witches, you know.
Or are we taking all that energy and it's going up the spire to the person that's taking it all and turning it into money magic? That's my question.
That's pretty practical. That one.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not talking about the true for Jacob and Azertus. Like, I'm not talking about the true like meaning of it for you guys. I'm talking about what they're doing now.
Yeah, intellectual reserve, right? Yeah, the intellectual reserve.
Well, I'm curious, what happened if Joseph Smith grew up in a time of Bitcoin? Like, what would change about the whole origins of Mormonism if it was all about like trying to mine the next Bitcoin block or something?
I mean, if he had been born in any other time, it'd have been so different. He was born in the 1920s instead of the 1820s. It would have been Moroni Mouse. You know, like you got to imagine like all the things that could have gone differently.
I love it. I
have to ask you, Andreas, since you might be the one advocate here of like Mormon magic being like a real thing. If we take that at face value, Mormon, magic Mormon underpants, are they objectively magic? Could you take Mormon underpants that are magic for you unequivocally in your mind, give them to me? Do they lose their magic? And if so, when do they lose their magic?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're a Sikh and you wear a turban, like the crown chakra energy is going into your turban. If you're wearing total body coverage, especially considering the junk pocket, your kundalini chakra energy, it's sort of the inversion of a turban, right? And turbans don't lose their power, but you don't necessarily transfer that into another. Like people will take their master's turban, right? But it's not the same as if your relationship with the item. So there's also something about like a mental fetish that occurs where this is doing this from a placebo effect, but you believe in it, and that relationship becomes super strong. So you could take it from a atheist perspective, and it's still really useful to you. But in terms of magic, yeah, I mean, you're talking about particular symbols. These I don't know if we've mentioned it on the show, but they're basically the same symbols of Freemasonry. So yeah, Freemasonry are using, that's exactly what they're doing. They're using the same They're using the same symbols. They're using the same symbols broken up or added together with slightly different meaning and interpretation, which is good enough for people to do the ritual. Clearly,
Taco Bell Freemasonry, that's what we call it.
But Mormons, we just talked about a lot of Mormons don't know what this means, and they're going through it too. So clearly, I think that putting your effort and energy into something, it's like it does not matter why you practice yoga. If you're doing push-ups, you will have muscle response return. If you practice guitar every day. So a lot of this, when we say it's craft, that's what that means. It's not just woo. It's a lot of craft. There's a lot of things that you do which change you as a person. And how good are they at doing that? Well, they can take a child and turn it into a man or a woman. Sometimes either way, like they can epigenetically get you to become almost anything. Like the idea of turning you into a god isn't that weird if you think about it, right? It's just a series of steps. And so, yeah, I think it's true to say that there is magic there, but I don't think, Jacob, you're not saying that there isn't spirit to it. You're just saying it's not necessarily God's underpants. And I agree with that. I don't necessarily think it's God's thing. It sounds more like it's a temple thing, and we have to figure out whether or not that temple is the Deuteronomist or they're the good guys or the bad guys. Like, these are things to understand.
Yeah, I would simply point out that in my entire hold on, there's probably a ringing happening that I gotta go.
I was like, who's calling me? Yeah.
There is, in my experience, having worn the garments for over 20 years, I've always perceived it and experienced it as my dedication to the covenants that I make in the temple. That's what unlocks the powers of heaven, as opposed to the garment itself. It's just a representation of the covenant relationship I'm trying to be faithful to.
This almost sounds like an NLP anchor. And if someone stole my NLP anchor, it would be completely meaningless to them because they don't have the
underwear changed a lot too. Like, I feel like the underwear maybe 100 years ago was.
We may have seen a picture or two about that.
Oh yeah, I'll try and pull the picture back up again.
Jacob has a little visitor.
No, it is poltergeist. That's what's happening.
I love it.
So here was the progression, as I understand. This is the male only. I didn't find one for the female. But yeah, basically started as like a full suit, followed by a couple versions of long johns, followed by this modern version.
Yeah, but you'll see, and like this is on Ladder Wave, we don't talk about this as much because a lot of the members would probably be uncomfortable, but you can talk about it here. Look at the symbols here, and you have this like every knee will bow. Go ahead, Heidi. Walk them through it.
Oh yeah, we did this. We walked them through all the signs and symbols here.
Good.
Yes. And so I think they've got a good understanding of what's up. Like I think that the members don't. I think that a lot of them don't. I think that, and this is the hard part of me being an outspoken person against Mormonism. I'm not against Mormons because a lot of my family are Mormon. A lot of my family are just really nice people that would never hurt a fly. Like they're just
talk you into coming to church with me.
I can't do it. I'm like, oh,
I want to say this about, for me, I still go to the same ward that had me, the same congregation that had me excommunicated. And what I've noticed, and this is as sincere of an observation that I can make, those that remain active in church are of the nature not to look into the history of the church.
Yeah.
Dude, did you know that if you use Unicode, you can make the Mormon symbols? Check this out. I just did it. Click that.
Oh,
yeah.
Let's check it out.
Oh my, I see it. I
don't see it yet.
It's just on the comment section.
There we go. Oh, got it. Sorry,
really
I was looking somewhere else.
So like, I feel like, yeah, you can start using these symbols, maybe like yourself. How about that? Like, how about figure out if there's any value to them in your own life? No? Well, Jacob's like, no, stay away from them. They're brigamists and they're evil. Tell me more.
I'm on the that train. Stay away. You're invoking things into your orifices. Who knows what they put in the bum? We don't even know.
I want to say, Calix, we'll have you on maybe the next episode. You can talk all about your experience.
Calix, did he have a Mormon underpants experience? All right.
Is this a Mormon experience or just something else in general?
Did you do a bunch of mushrooms or are you talking about Mormonism? Or is it both?
I also wanted to, in a only like half jokingly way, but much to Heidi's surmise, I'm maybe openly open to Mormonism. So if one of you guys can sell me on Mormonism, there is a chance that
certainly go to www.xchurch.us and then you just have to join our way. Like, as Heidi knows, there's a lot of cooler versions of Mormonism. You know what I mean? Like, you got to get in these little sects.
Well, are you in competition? Is Jacob IsBell and Andreas Zerdis in a Mormon competition right now?
I would just me and P. Nelly.
Andreas and I have to hang out in person and do some singing and praying.
Spiritual magic.
He wants to do mushroom.
Figure out who the true prophet is, right?
We're gonna try to make that happen this summer. I feel bad that it hasn't happened already.
It's going to happen.
It's supposed to have happened.
I waited for you at the fight, Zerdis.
I'm the worst. Sad. I was really sad too. If it makes you feel any better, I was pretty sad to miss it.
let me give you guys a song before I have to politely bow out.
Ooh.
Please.
All right, let's do it.
Some of our
Is this
listeners'
part of
favorite
you
part.
convincing me to join Mormonism, or is this its own thing?
So they, oops, sorry, let me turn off the reverb.
I love that reverb though.
They don't allow guitar in sacrament services in general, but this is a very, very traditional LDS hymn still sung, but it is so much better on the guitar. Many of the hymns are. It invokes a good energy. When I sing hymns, even these traditional LDS ones that I've been raised with, I view this as a weapon of war against the adversary. It is meant to bring a percussive rhythm to it. It's meant to give an energy that bolsters up those trying to serve God and strikes fear into those trying to fight against him.
The devil loves the guitar. What? No, I'm just kidding.
Ye elders of Israel, come join now with me and seek out the righteous where'er they may be, in desert, on mountain, on land, or on sea, and bring them to Zion, the pure and the free. O Babylon, we bid thee farewell. We're going to the mountains of Ephraim to dwell. The harvest is great and the labors are few, but if we're united, we all things can do. We'll gather the wheat from the midst of the tares and bring them from bondage, from sorrows and snares. O Babylon, we bid thee farewell. We're going to the mountains of Ephraim to dwell. We'll go to the poor like our captain of old, and visit the weary, the hungry and cold. We'll cheer up their hearts with the news that he bore, and point them to Zion and life evermore. O Babylon, we bid thee farewell. We're going to the mountains of Ephraim to dwell. O Babylon, we bid thee farewell. We're going to the mountains of Ephraim to dwell. Enjoy.
Thank you, Jacob, for being here.
Glorious,
Do you want to
glorious.
give a quick shout out to where people can find you? I was trying to find you on Instagram, and it looks like you're vanished from there.
I am Instagramless at the moment. I should be
Okay.
doing more. The two easiest ways, if you look up Disciple of Christ, sometimes you have to type in Disciple of Christ Jacob IsBell. You'll find my channel on YouTube. I do long form interviews, commonly of people's spiritual journeys, as well as I is on the Facebook. If you look up Jacob IsBell, you're probably going to see a bearded person who just won a jiu-jitsu match as the profile pic. Feel free to send me a friend request. I always ask, to what do I owe the pleasure of your friend request? Just to see if I'm talking to a robot or not. Anywho, I like posting Jesus spam. I love doing memes and things of that nature. And if you play your cards right, you might be going on a very select list of those who receive mildly inappropriate memes from me.
Oh yeah.
Let's do that. That sounds fun. Almost as fun as watching the little person behind you pop up every
Oh,
now
it's
and
adorable.
again. Very adorable.
My pleasure.
Love.
Ladies and
Yes.
gents, it's been great being a part of you.
Love you, Jacob. See you
Awesome.
soon.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob.
Awesome.
So
Well,
have we left
this has
anything
been
on the
fun.
table? Andreas, is there anything based on the Brotherhood of the Magical Underpants that name evokes that you wish you could have brought up? Because now's the time.
I mean, it sounds like you talked about it, but I guess the square of the compass, like the idea of like the square of God's promise, like the compass, like which angle like you're going for. I feel like it's every knee will bow. These are not bad
is.
excuses for these things, and the idea that Masonry, you know, a lot of people had this anti-Masonic hysteria, so they're saying, oh well, because it's in Masonry, it's bad. And I don't do that. I'm just saying, like, for me, it's like, wow, look, more and more and more, you find examples all over the world. And coming from a Catholic, the Catholics are all about killing and forcing people to convert to their religion, and you kind of lose the history in there. But this modern version of Christianity that everybody hates, actually more than Mormonism, right? Because it's all about you can do whatever you want, you can be a sinner, you can get away with it, you can live forever, like that kind of thing, just with a blood atonement sacrifice. Well, that's like a bigger example than the Brigham blood atonement rituals, is like what modern Christians believe. Whereas they're converting people around the world, and everywhere around the world, you find people that have this idea of, well, they're really similar ideas. There's like shamanism, there's family, there's God's family, there's honor, there's atonement through your own actions. And these are the people getting killed in China, in Bolivia, in Africa, or whatever. But their religions are far more similar to Mormonism, and even to some of these ideas of Masonry, of betterment or whatever. So are there evil people in all of these organizations, even Masonry and the Mormons? Yes, probably. But does that mean that the ideas or the ideology behind becoming a better person and keeping in your sights maybe the source of all things, and that there's an architect to that who might not be good or evil? I think these are really deep concepts that we can learn from and use. So yeah, while I'm not completely against the undergarments, I think it's something that everyone should investigate more. I think the most important thing, like when Heidi says, like, people just need to know what these things are more. I'm a strong believer in that. I think the secret thing, turning a mystery into a secret, is disingenuous, because the people that are pretending to keep the secret don't understand it that much better than the people who can't comprehend the mystery itself. Yeah.
Mhm.
And in case you missed this, I did want to just edge this one back in.
Ooh.
Here is LDS membership
Mhm.
graph, right? Which looks like a meteoric rise.
These are actual numbers of people wearing magic underwear. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the graph
trending.
of Masons membership.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
there is a very real argument to be made here that in the near future, maybe in our lifetimes or the next generation's lifetimes, Mormonism will be the only real remnant of Masonry in America, at least, especially with these numbers dwindling. I mean, this is basically them approaching less than 1 million. They're actually going from
Wow.
6 digits towards 5 digits rapidly, whereas the Mormon Church seems to be doing the inverse of that.
Dang. Well, I hope it works out. I think that there's so many Masonic temples out there that are so cool. I don't know if this is going to work out that way. So the Mormons for a long time thought they were losing numbers too, until they found out there were other continents, you know, with other colored skins, right? So I feel like you'll find the same. Like, if you go to Africa, Masonry is probably on a rise in certain places, and in any place like Mexico City, Masonry was so important because of the collapse of the society of government after James Polk, you know, and the destruction of the Mexican government, the Maximilian. The same thing's happening right now all over the world, and there will need be mafias, men's lodges, secret societies, philanthropic groups, right? Yakuza, like the whole thing that's what arises when society can't sustain itself and function, right? And so I think that you'll see it emerge again one way or another, and I doubt it's going to lose a lot of the symbolism. Somehow the symbolism seems to make it from one club to another. It's like the little rascals thing. If you're raised in it, like, this is the American ideology. So that's also interesting to me. Like, the reason why Mormonism is interesting is it's not, to me, like, a lot of people look at Mormonism and say, oh, it's just all made up. I see it more like, wow, all these different things have all collected themselves here from all over the world, right? And so there's maybe something objective about that, in the same way there's something objective about the other path. They're saying this is Christianity, the satanic one I'm talking about, versus Mormonism, but really it's, you know, all of the peoples of the earth's natural way versus this sort of inversion process. So I don't think that it'll really go away forever, because people will constantly rediscover it and people will be holding on to parts of it. Like that's why Masonry's made it so long, is because there's essential rituals that were saved, right? Today, you're going to probably see more of those rituals in like self-help groups or like at Esalen psychotherapy.
Well, I've made an argument before that I think I'll keep pushing on until someone like points out a very obvious flaw, but that Freemasonry seems that it might have more staying power than many other cults that came before it, because they literally adopted buildings and the establishment of buildings that last for thousands of years as their teaching methods. So now when someone says Freemasonry and then they point at like an actual structure that's been around for thousands of years that still exists now, they can be like, oh wow, that's impressive, you're taking credit of that thing that I see that's in books that go back.
Mormons are building temples, right?
Well,
and
that's more
than ever.
That might have been them picking up on like the actual important parts of Freemasonry, which is to dedicate part of your symbolism into things that will last thousands of years beyond.
I don't think it's like an inspired thing from Freemasonry, so it would make sense like as a business effort, but I think it's more just part of the esoteric again. So I was thinking about this the other day, that Bambi, whatever her name is, the Wiccan Irish girl from the Eurovision concert, right? If you've seen her face, hold on, Eurovision witch, right? She looks super terrifying. And
is this just going to be Xena LaVey again? It always is. Okay.
This lady right here, right? But if you look up Bambi Thug before, after, you can see that she used to look like a normal, like human being before, like normal. Here you go. Here's Bambi Thug when she was like a normal girl, right? So she used to look like a normal Mormon girl, but like she lives in Ireland, and in Ireland they used to have cathedrals and nice things, but they're tearing them all down. Like they've got some nice mosques now, but you're not Muslim, you're not going in there, so you're not seeing the beauty in the world. And I remember like going to Louisiana and seeing like cathedrals and these Masonic schools. They're torn down now. You have these little mobile home tract house schools that they're in, these little boxes, and there's no golden ratio, there's no beauty to see in the world to emulate. So the Mormons putting up these temples everywhere, kids are seeing the golden ratio, they're seeing the potential of realization of divine math, and that's helping them from an abstract level learn how to be better people. So just seeing the temple everywhere is a huge effigy of God's grace, but also of like divine and divine environmental science, right? And that's part. If you take that away from people, then they go for, there's a lack of beauty to search for in the world. So yeah, on one level, it sustains the church. It serves this purpose of people can do their rituals in these temples. It will last longer than some of these members, and people might start going back to it. Like that's all practical business sense, but just proving that it can be done is a sign of power, and it makes an impression on the plebeian, like, so that they should try to be a part of that and to manifest as much power as possible, which is, again, it's a good goal, because a lot of these churches are telling you, just give us money. You don't really have to focus on bettering yourself or your family. You know, here's one that's saying, no, like you got to go so hard. And, you know, that's granted benefits the church, because the harder you go, they get 10% of that. But you got to go hard because it's going to make the world a better place. Like that's not every religion's goal, right? But that is a very Masonic goal, to the betterment of mankind. So these are not bad goals to me.
Right. As long as it's going to the right person.
Right.
Like that's what worries me, is that some level
practice,
of perversion. Mm-hmm. Yes.
The practice is not the same as the goal. 100% agree.
Exactly. Yes.
Jacob is gone, so we won't get his answer on this, but I'm curious on Heidi and Andreas, your answers on in Masonry. There's not necessarily a desire to turn everyone on the planet into a Mason. That's almost antithetical to the concept of Masonry, where you're trying to like cream of only the best of the best, right? And I almost always assumed that Mormonism was kind of a similar thing, where is there a net positive for the Mormon Church to want every single human on the entire planet to be Mormons, or does that dilute Mormonism versus, because as a Catholic, it's like, no, you want everyone to be Catholic. You want missionaries everywhere.
The Catholics don't want everyone to be Jesuit. It's very similar. You know, like you can have a hierarchy. Like there are some, it's not that you don't want everyone to be a priest. In fact, I think in a sense you want everyone. So there's probably two kinds of Mormonism there too. A lot of people are thinking the establishment of Zion, because that's what Joseph Smith said. And that is a cool idea because I don't have to keep secrets anymore because we're all searching for mysteries together. We're all, you know, it gets rid of that weird thing where like I'm not and you're not a member. It's gone once you're all a member. But that doesn't mean everyone is called to be like a Jedi, you know? And so they consider the highest priesthood as being like fulfilled with powers and things like that. Similar with women, they want women to be married if they're going to have that power, right? So they're like part of all these things that they do to try to restrict your use of that power, right? And they only want you to have that power if they think that you're super responsible, and their idea of responsible is you're, again, establishing Zion, helping all these people. So they're members of the church, they're members of the ward, but that doesn't mean they're members of the temple. And to have a temple recommend from the ward isn't like everybody, not by a long shot, you know.
So you want them in the resistance, but maybe not a Jedi.
They want all the plebes they can get, but
Yeah.
they're not, like he said, the hierarchy is a whole different situation. Like everybody's not going to get the second anointing. Everybody's not going to be in the quorum of the 70. Like this is stuff that's reserved for elite purposes. So.
Does X Church have a second anointing?
Yeah, but it's right after the first one. You can do them both in the same day. It's like kind of like dentistry. Like sometimes it takes a while, so you do both sides. But
are there any garments for X Church?
I'm working on it. I want them to be really cool, though. You know what I mean? Like Heidi's gonna have to approve some designs. Cool.
No saggy crotches.
Oh, I'm
no
gonna Lycra.
saggy.
This is Lycra. Yeah, it's gonna be
so uncomfortable.
This is gonna be this. You could do gymnastics and this stuff.
There
I'm
you
thinking,
go.
have you seen Tron? It's something like Tron, but a little bit thinner. I've got plans.
He's got some big plans.
If you don't want to wear them, that's on you. That's all I gotta say. Like it's the future.
There we go. That's what it is.
All right. Well, Andres and I have a show in a couple hours from now, so we'll start winding down here.
Too.
But Heidi, we're gonna do a show.
Yes, I'll send some dates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After the 26th, I'll make sure that I'm free. I can't wait.
Okay. Amazing. Can't wait. Much love. I'm sad you missed the thing.
I'm a bad person. I'm going to
No,
I'm
you're
a son
not.
of perdition.
That's all that Mormon talk. Stop it.
Oh gosh, heck.
Well, you got some plugs to give before we wrap up?
Yes. I am Heidi Love. I'm at the Unfiltered Rise everywhere podcasts are served. I do Patreon, Mormons, Mayhem, and Murder series. That's pretty good. I think 2 shows extra a month, plus other benefits, no ads, all the fun things. So check me out there.
And she's a lovely lady.
Aw, thank you. I love these guys. This is always such a fun show. We never know what's going to happen.
This was an awesome one. I actually got so many answers, even if it wasn't Andreas's answer.
Oh, that's better probably. I'm going to go watch
Andreas's next time.
I'm going to watch Jacob's. And Heidi's got
next time.
She's lived it.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And Calix, we'll have you on. You can ask all your questions. You can share your experience. I'd love to have you on.
Dude, he looks like an angry Pikachu with nicotine high. I hope he does okay. We love you, Calix. Come watch Think Tank later.
Yeah, any plugs, Andreas, or just
come watch Think Tank later with me and Thomas.
Come watch it 9:00 tonight, Eastern, and 3 hours from now you can hear us maybe reference this.
It'll be fun.
Awesome.
All right, let's see you guys then. I'll have to edit Jacob's outro in again. Maybe we'll remix it. I think we could do a Jacob IsBell Mormon remix of something.
I actually really liked your Mormon Garment song that you made. It made me laugh a lot. So
the Magic Underpants song?
Yes, the Magic Underpants song.
Do I have?
I thought it was pretty hysterical.
Oh, of course. Why would I not have it in here? Okay, next time we'll lead with the Magic Mormon Underpants. But go on Spotify and all the places and just search for Magic Underpants by Sound Scientists. You'll love it. It's a great song.
Bye, guys.
See you soon.
Bye.